this isn't a good time to show up. He didn't have to show up to that. He could have had that, they could have signed it, said right. It could have been done. And all the pressure would have been on Russia, because all indications are Russia doesn't want to sit down and do anything. Now, who the demands were a non-starter. Well, he was told to show up at the White House in a suit and tie. It was specific from the White House, according to Axios. Yes, true. He was told to show up in a necktie. He was told by Lindsey Graham before the blow-up, hey, don't take the bait. If the president says something that you disagree with, don't blow up. I heard Peter Doocy report yesterday from this couch that his sources inside the White House said that there will be no deal until Zelensky absolutely apologizes for what he did the other day.
So I've reached out to one of my sources in the administration, and this was on background before, but I said, can I share this? Because I was there 2 days before at the White House, and they were working the deal, and I said, fine, share. They were going back and forth about this deal with Mike Waltz as well as Marco Rubio. Now, you got to understand the dynamics that were working. First of all, he skipped the meeting with Scott Bessent when he went over to Ukraine. Slept through the meeting, and then Marco Rubio and the vice president, they come up with this deal with Zelensky, and he says, okay, I'm going to just go to the parliament and get it signed off on. Then he goes publicly and goes against the deal. So the administration was already on the edge, but the president was still saying, let's get the deal done. So to Steve's point, he has this congressional meetup, and Lindsey Graham, to your point, says, don't blow up, go out there, be grateful, be thankful, and you go do it this
Wear a suit.
Wear a suit. He goes there and does the exact opposite. All the advice that he was given, and he tries to litigate his case before the media.
Yeah, it's amazing that we have helped them so much, given them so many resources, so much money, so much equipment, and that is the way he was treating our president and J.D. Vance in the Oval Office.
He wants more.
He's saying he told the BBC he's still willing to have a constructive dialogue with the United States. He said, I just want the Ukrainian position to be heard. We want our partners to remember who the aggressor is in this war. Here is Secretary Marco Rubio.
I really am puzzled why anyone thinks that trying to be a peacemaker is a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when it's Donald Trump trying to do it. I would ask everybody this. If there are no negotiations, what is the alternative? Another 4 years of war, another 3 years of war, in which the United States and Europe continues to pour billions of dollars into a war in Ukraine? Is that the alternative? I've asked every foreign minister I meet with, tell me your idea of how this turns out. Most don't have a plan. A few have said, well, let's give them another year of fighting. A year from now, a year later, after another year of death, another year of destruction, then maybe Putin will be ready to negotiate at that point. No one here is claiming Vladimir Putin is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize this year, or that he should be the Man of the Year of the Humanitarian Association. What we're arguing here is he has a very large country. They're full war footing. They're cranking out weapons now at a war footing pace. And we need to figure out, is there a way to get them to stop the war? And the only way you're going to do that is to get Russians engaged in negotiations.
So after shooting that Chris Van Hollen, was just off the hook on Gaza, against the Israelis, and anything that Trump's doing. He says he regrets his support of Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. So does he understand? Number one, Marco Rubio was sitting right there.
You really know how to get me.
Welcome back. President Trump's additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods set to go into effect tomorrow, on top of the 10% tariff already placed last month. This, along with 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, all due to the failures to stop the flow of fentanyl into the country. The president also directing the Commerce Department to look into a possible tariff on Chinese copper, even as China vows retaliation should that happen. China holding its annual two-sessions meeting where its National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference will outline Beijing's economic and policy priorities for the year. Here now is Fox News contributor and Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for China Strategy, Michael Pillsbury. Michael, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. What are your expectations, Michael, for this upcoming two sessions? Looks like Michael Pillsbury's the shot froze. I'm going to get back to him
Here to play
momentarily. But Liz King, I think it's pretty clear at this point President Trump understands the threat that is communist China, and it's moving in several directions, whether it's trade or other issues, trying to push back on the Communist Party's behavior.
No question about it. And really one of the great mysteries of the last 4 years, Maria, is why Joe Biden didn't do more to confront China. He did keep certain tariffs in place, which was certainly helpful, but otherwise I think he bowed to China at every opportunity, and we're sort of living with the outcome of that. I do think that some of this ambition of ending the war and partnering with Ukraine and developing minerals and so forth is really partly to undermine the fact that China has such a grip on those incredibly important ingredients, important to any country that's going electric. Remember, the Biden at White House pushed the United States very far down the path of EVs and other electrification of our economy, and yet China really holds a grip, a stranglehold on many of the materials and products that we need to accomplish that. So it was a real handout to China, and I think one of the reasons that this possible deal with Ukraine makes sense is it does kind of relieve American dependence on China. What could be more important?
All right, that's true. Michael Pillsbury is with us. Michael, welcome. Good to see you. Your reaction?
Well, I always wait for whatever Liz King says, so that's the first point to make. The second point, I guess, is when we look back at the first term negotiations with China and Xi Jinping, there's a number of things that are repeating themselves already. First is the slowness on the Chinese side. They really like face-to-face negotiations. We've got 13 rounds with President Trump in the first term. That is 13 negotiations either in Beijing or in Washington. You remember President Trump kind of outfoxed them. He would bring the Chinese delegation into the Oval Office with the media, kind of put them on the spot to make more progress. We haven't got to that point yet. There's really been no reply from Xi Jinping. I guess the third point is President Trump's repeated positive references to Xi Jinping during the campaign and recently, that he's his friend, that they can solve problems around the world. He's trying the sweet approach, you might say, in the beginning, but so far there seems to be no progress. There seems to be no slowdown in the precursors for fentanyl. There's no real counter offer to what Trump is doing. So I think we're looking at a repeat for maybe a full year of negotiations again and delegations going back and forth before we make any progress. I'm sorry to be so pessimistic, but that's how it looks to me, Maria.
Well, I mean, that's why, President Trump is watching China, because they didn't even, keep their promise from the last trade deal from his first term. But, they begin on the back foot. So now we're talking about a 20% tariff on China when you do the 10% initially discussed and then the president's additional. But China has a stranglehold on rare earth minerals, and it's more in focus than ever after the U.S.'s deal with Ukraine fell apart. I spoke with the President's Intelligence Advisory Board Chairman, Devin Nunes, yesterday about the importance of these minerals. Here's what he said. What?
Look at what happened last week with the Zelensky meeting. What was lost on everyone is what President Trump was trying to do there is talk about rare earth elements and how Ukraine can play an important role in that. China has went around the globe over the last 30 years with their Belt Initiative, and they've locked up these minerals where they control them all. So Zelensky, whether or not he realized it or not, President Trump was trying to say, hey, let us get in there, form an economic partnership. China's done this, Maria, without ever firing a bullet. They're doing it through economic means. Hopefully Zelensky understands it, our European allies understand it. I think you'll see people get back to the table quickly.
You think Zelensky will ultimately sign that rare earth minerals deal? You think he'll come back and sign it?
Either him or somebody else, but they're going to have to end the war, and they're going to have to build economic ties with the West.
And as your adventure ranking, you're welcome.
Michael, your reaction?
Well, Devin Nunes is right, especially the point about 30 years. In my next book, Maria, I go back into the evidence that we missed 30 years ago, that China had kind of a long-term plan to induce dependency in the United States. The rare earth minerals was part of it, but they were doing many things over the last 30 years that our people were just asleep at the switch, frankly. And now, how to correct this
It's going to involve congressional action. We've got to get some kind of legislation that tells the executive branch, be careful about rare earths and about dependency on China. Be more honest with the Congress. So far, we're not seeing that. We're in the early phases of this situation, Maria, and I think we're not going to know much for another month or two.
Yeah, I want to get your take on the Panama Canal because President Trump is seeking to regain control of the Panama Canal, and I asked Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick about it yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures. Watch this. I know you've looked at the Panama Canal. Can you tell us where you are in that and what it looks like in terms of U.S. interests in the Panama Canal?
I mean, imagine this. So we give the Panama, we spend in current dollars $1 trillion, and 38,000 Americans lose their lives to malaria to build the Panama Canal. Jimmy Carter gives it to them, but says they cannot favor any nation. And then Panama leases both mouths to the Chinese. The Chinese are building bridges over it, so our military and our ships have to go under a Chinese bridge. And then if you drive across or you ride in one of these barges across the Panama Canal and look at both sides, 70% of every letter and every word is Chinese. They sold out to the Chinese. The president is absolutely right. For national security, the Panama Canal needs to be ours and our protection. And the president's going to protect America, and he's going to protect shipping, and he's going to help do it. And so you should expect the Panama Canal eventually to come back under our oversight because we need to protect ourselves.
Well, that was a pretty significant statement, I thought, Michael.
Yes, there is a treaty that Panama will maintain neutrality. And some reading of that treaty is that we have the right to go back if Panama falls. This is another example, Maria, of the watchdog on China being asleep at the switch. This has been going on at least 10 years. The depth of penetration of Chinese companies, Chinese people, and just the population of Chinese who are now in Panama. This has gone unnoticed. God bless President Trump for waking up and doing something about it, but he was out of office during the Biden term when this really got quite threatening.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Calgary Ukrainian community gathering at City Hall Sunday, expressing frustration and anger following the meeting between Ukrainian President Zelensky and U.S. President Donald Trump last Friday. The rally brought hundreds of Calgarians together in support of Ukraine.
What's going on right now is just unbelievable. You know, the pain that people are suffering all over the world, especially in Ukraine. All the Ukrainians are banding together all over the world, to fight this horrible situation.
All the support for Ukraine is important to me. Every day, supporting them and supporting my friends that are still in Ukraine.
One Ukrainian newcomer shares her thoughts on Trump's conversation with President Zelensky.
Friday was tough, and seeing this interview, I watched it from the beginning till the end, and I don't know, just
the origin of the House of Morgan, or J.P. Morgan, is in the city of London. They actually came about as a result of the death of George Peabody, who was a major American banker in the city of London. When he died, he didn't have any heirs. He left the business to Junius Morgan, who was J.P. Morgan's father. And on page 11 here, I'm going to read about a really interesting incident that I think shows why J.P. Morgan and indirectly the financial system in the U.S. is beholden to the city, maybe only up until now. Monday, March 3rd, 2025, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Well, today we're going to look at whether President Trump has learned the lesson of the past and is not going to fall for the trap that President Wilson fell into that brought the United States into World War I in 1917 and has led the United States into the path of empire and to where it's now, where it's overstretched itself so much. And we're also going to look at whether this is all related to the City of London. Yes, the City of London, I think, is a lot more powerful than most people think. So, before we go further into that, I just wanted to give a shout out to one of our great affiliates, and it's Dirty Men Safe. So, what is Dirty Men Safe? Well, it's underground safe get tech. And I think he made a statement, actually, which I'll try to find and put it up here, that he greatly regrets signing that act into law, the Federal Reserve Act. He was warned by many people, one of them being Charles Lindbergh, a senior, who said a central bank or Federal Reserve System would be the biggest money trust ever in history. And I think Mr. Lindbergh was correct. He was a congressman from Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. His son, of course, was the famous aviator who flew across the Atlantic solo. I think it was in 1927. So that was the first trap, the Federal Reserve. And why do I think that was the first trap? Well, because if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island and other books about the Federal Reserve, for the bankers in London and New York, they needed a central bank in New York because the United States was becoming more and more powerful economically and trade-wise. And I think the British as well, they were looking to neutralize German economic maritime power. Germany, don't forget, had only been a united country since 1870 or thereabouts, 71, I think. And it was growing massively. And I don't think the Germans wanted to rule the world, but the British were paranoid. So they were working even before the Federal Reserve to neutralize the Germans. And I think creating the Federal Reserve was going to be a way to siphon off the hard-working capital from the American public. And World War I, of course, I spoke a bit about World War I in my Sunday video yesterday. You can have a listen to it. I'm going to put it up here in the cards. By the way, we're going to have the live stream tonight, Monday, 8 p.m. London time. We couldn't do it yesterday. It wasn't possible, and I apologize. But yes, so the Federal Reserve was very important. So World War I, back to World War I, that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about. We get to 1916, and the war was a stalemate. No one was really making any progress. They're stuck there in the trenches. And the best thing that could have happened, and I think the Germans even proposed this. I mean, you can correct me, but from what I understand is they wanted a peace deal, and they wanted to go back to the pre-1914 status quo, and that was it. But then came the Balfour Declaration, which was a banker's document, really. It was written by Lord Rothschild on behalf of Lord Balfour, who was, I think the foreign secretary at the time, or he was in government in the UK, and it said it promised that the UK would eventually help create a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. And in 1917 as well, of course, Lord Allenby conquered Palestine and conquered Palestine from in the Middle East, that area, from the Ottomans. So what's that got to do with things? Well, I think that was the deal. The New York and the London bankers, they decided to keep financing the war and bring in the United States. And what they got back was this Balfour Declaration adoption by the British. Yes, it took over 30 years to eventually get the creation of the State of Israel. And here I'm just talking about facts. I'm not judging anything. This is just a way some people see it. And so what's going on today? Well, I think President Trump has realized that for over 100 years, America has been hijacked by the powers in the City of London. And by that, I don't mean all British people. I mean the elite here. And it's the same people that want to keep fighting the Russians in the Ukraine. They don't want peace because it ruins all their efforts. They thought that with President Biden, they could go and provoke Russia and get Russia to put all these sanctions on Russia, and that Russia would be on its knees after a year. But here we are with a new president who doesn't see eye to eye with the globalists and the City of London gang, and they're cornered, and that's why they're so desperate in this meeting yesterday in London, and it's crazy. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister here, wants to send troops to Ukraine. He's written another loan, £2.6 billion to Ukraine for 5,000 missiles. Doesn't like he wants peace. And I'm going to now go back to history. And a lot of you know that I worked in the City of London. I mean, the first time I came here, in terms of work, was in an internship as an intern for a Eurobond trading company in 1989. And then I went back to Switzerland, worked there for 2 years, and came back to work in 1992. Of course, I had no inkling or idea. I hadn't really studied history of what the City of London was all about. I just thought it was one of the major financial sectors, but I didn't realize how much control it had. And it's ironic, though, that before I came to London, I had actually already read this book, The House of Morgan, The Secret History of Money and Power. I highly recommend it. I think they've changed the title of this book. This is from the late 80s. And why do I bring this up? Well, because you might understand why the City of London is so important. What's it got to do with the House of Morgan? Well, the origin of the House of Morgan, or J.P. Morgan, is in the City of London. They actually came about as a result of the death of George Peabody, who was a major American banker in the City of London. When he died, he didn't have any heirs. He left the business to Junius Morgan, who was J.P. Morgan's father. And on page 11 here, I'm going to read about a really interesting incident that I think shows why J.P. Morgan and indirectly the financial system in the U.S. is beholden to the city, maybe only up until now. Maybe that's why President Trump, I'm speculating here, that's why all the gold in the City of London is being brought back. to the United States. But anyway, I read this book over 30 years ago, and I went through this section, but I didn't think much of it. And why? How did I find out about it? Well, when I met the Nome of Zurich in November, he told me that J.P. Morgan had been bailed out by Bank of England and the Rothschilds in 1857. And I thought, how do you know that? And he said, well, someone that worked for J.P. Morgan told me about that. And then I went through this book and I found it. So here we go. It's on page 11. It says, then in 1857, it looked as if Morgan would be denied his promised fortune. Wheat prices tumbled with the end of the Crimean War. Those wars, Crimean War, Ukraine, I mean, history doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes, right? Causing hardship for American banks and railroads. By October, New York banks stopped gold payments. Well, that's what the Bank of England is doing now. Preventing American correspondents from transferring funds to Peabody in London. He was suddenly overextended on his American bills, American investments. At the same time, London investors sold American securities, siphoning more funds from Peabody and provoking a serious cash squeeze. Rumors raced through London that George Peabody and Company was about to fail, a prospect heartily relished by rivals who disliked the old American. And another interesting thing, when you go into the city of London now, right by the Bank of England, there's a Royal Exchange. And outside the Royal Exchange, there's a big statue of a man sitting on a chair. And guess what? That's George Peabody. Anyway, Morgan had also earned the displeasure of Barings by aggressively cutting prices on American securities and trying to steal their accounts. Now the major London houses told Morgan they would bail out the firm, but only if Peabody shut down the bank within a year. When Morgan relayed this patent blackmail to Peabody, the older man reacted like a wounded lion. Defiant, he dared them to bring down the firm. George Peabody and Company was saved by an emergency credit line of £800,000 from the Bank of England, with Barings as a guarantor of the loan. The eventual Peabody, who felt Barings had mercilessly pressed him to pay outstanding bills, asked that the name of the firm be stricken from a published list of banks rescuing the firm. For Peabody, who had just made a resplendent return to America after a 20-year absence, the incident confirmed his innate pessimism. It is not yet 3 months since I parted from you and left the country prosperous and the people happy, he wrote his niece. Now all this gloom and affliction. So it says the 1857 panic made a deep impression on Morgan's 20-year-old son, Pierpont J.P. Morgan, who had just started on Wall Street as an unsalaried apprentice at Duncan Sherman and Company, New York agent for Peabody. So I'm going to stop right here. So London, that's one of the reasons why it's so important. There's another interesting book called The Empire of the City, The Secret History of British Financial Power, E.C. Knut, or Knut. I highly recommend that. It's not very long book, very interesting. And now back to Trump. Of course, we don't know exactly who's bringing all this physical gold into the United States. One of the LBMA members, major bullion house, Stone FX or Stone X, theirs and Bullion Gold have said that about 2,000 tons have gone to the U.S. I suspect it could be the U.S. government. It could be a big investor, but like Warren Buffett, or it could be people worried about the geopolitical situation. Like Greenspan has said, in times of war and uncertainty, people don't accept paper. Only gold will do as payment. And by that, I don't mean in the shops. I mean internationally between nations and big corporations. And we need to look as well, maybe a little bit at Trump's background, because his mother was born in the Isle of Lewis, which is in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. Her name was Mary Ann MacLeod, and then became Mary Ann MacLeod Trump. Why is that important? Well, President Trump professes he says that his mom was very fond of the Queen and that she liked the royal family. But if you think about it, she was a Scot, not really English.
There was a good vibe with Zelensky and our president, vice president.
all unfold on national television Friday.
Normally we get a readout on this, but this time we saw it all before our eyes.
Yeah, right. And if you were watching Outnumbered, you saw the live playback of the video. You were on Outnumbered. I was indeed. I was the one lucky guy. Well, Zelensky was the one unlucky guy on Friday there. Usually, and this kind of stuff does happen between presidents and world leaders behind closed doors. And then afterwards, the readout is, well, the two world leaders had a frank discussion. And they are, they're united in finding a solution. Well, we saw that this relationship right there between the three of them is fractured. And Mr. Zelensky toned good. Yeah. Going in and fighting back, getting sassy with the president, and then was sassy. He was sassy. He got some bad advice from somebody, but it certainly was not the White House. They said, Mr. Zelensky, show up, wear a suit. Lindsey Graham said, whatever you do, don't get in. So what's Zelensky do? He gets into an argument with Donald Trump and Mr. Vance, and suddenly Mr. Z is looking for Plan B.
Yeah, he was kicked out of the White House. He said, well, I'm happening because we're giving you this deal because Zelensky wanted security guarantees, and President Trump and J.D. Vance said, look, you have not been grateful. Look at what we've done. We've sent you weapons, we've sent you money, and you have to be grateful. And it was the beginning of what could be a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
I really think, and Brian, I want to get your best. I really thought he crossed the line when he implied a threat. When he said the ocean, you guys have the ocean separated, but maybe not soon enough. And you saw the rage in the president at that point. He goes, don't you? You have no right to say that. You're in no position to tell us.
I thought when he said that, let Europe deal with it.
Yeah, right.
Let other people, let other countries give money.
But he also did one other thing that was extraordinary. Zelensky was lecturing past presidents. He said, look, Obama had the chance to stop it. Trump had the chance to stop it. So he's saying, hey, you didn't stop it, and look where we are. He said, and then Joe Biden didn't stop it. So he was sassy with the guy who he needed to bail him out on this. So on the couch, everyone was quiet except J.D. Vance, and Marco Rubio was sitting right in the middle as Secretary of State. He's the one who talked to the Russians in Saudi Arabia. He's the one who's going to be moving it up the ranks and maybe meeting with Lavrov again directly. Here's what he said was his take on what Zelensky did wrong.
I really am puzzled why anyone thinks that trying to be a peacemaker is a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when it's Donald Trump trying to do it. I would ask everybody this. If there are no negotiations, what is the alternative? Another 4 years of war, another 3 years of war, in which the United States and Europe continues to pour billions of dollars into a war in Ukraine? Is that the alternative? I've asked every foreign minister I meet with, tell me your idea of how this turns out. Most don't have a plan. A few have said, well, let's give them another year of fighting. A year from now, a year later, after another year of death, another year of destruction, then maybe Putin will be ready to negotiate at that point. No one here is claiming Vladimir Putin is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize this year, or that he should be the man of the year of the Humanitarian Association. What we're arguing here is he has a very large country. They're in full war footing. They're cranking out weapons now at a war footing pace. And we need to figure out, is there a way to get them to stop the war? And the only way you're going to do that is to get Russians engaged in negotiations.
Zelensky told the BBC that the minerals deal he is still ready to sign it.
Now he
Prime
is.
Minister Starmer of the UK said it would require they've been working over the weekend to try to come up with a peace plan, and he said that it would require strong U.S. backing. So this formal plan will send it to the U.S. and Donald Trump, he said.
NATO had some of the balance, which is, I don't think we were upset by it, but rather not. It's not helpful NATO meetings without us. That Europe put together a 4-step plan. He said to keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine is one. And lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security. Number 3, in the event of a peace deal, European leaders will aim to deter any future invasion, which I assume meant committing to troops. And number 4, there'll be a coalition of the willing to defend Ukraine and guarantee peace in the country. In other words, they're not calling us out. If anyone characterizes the Europeans as being angry at us, I have not read anything about that. But they're saying we have to somehow understand the U.S. might not be aboard in Ukraine.
I think they're calling us out. I really do. I think they're not saying
We're going to do it ourselves.
100%. And knock yourself out. Knock yourself out if you want to do it by yourself. But again, all of this is virtue. All of the photos that were released, all of the memes that were released, because at the end of the day, you have an ambassador from the UK that said, after all saying all of that nonsense, said, oh, none of this happens without the support of the
Well,
US.
here's ultimately what's going to happen. They had on paper the deal that was going to be signed. Whatever the magic number was, how many hundreds of billions of dollars worth of minerals the United States was going to get, Donald Trump just got a better deal because eventually we're going to sign it. But whatever that number was, say it was $200 billion, now it's 300 or 400. That's how Donald Trump works when it comes to negotiating. Hey, you blew it. You want to come back and talk to me? It's going to cost you. Maybe, but I think in the big picture, think long term. Do we want another American ally being taken over by another country? If we pull out for a sustained period of time, we have to be prepared for Kyiv to fall into Vladimir Putin's hand. And that's not going to look any administration makes it look good.
There is no daylight between House and Senate Republicans. We are all on one big team with the same mission, and that is to deliver the America First agenda heading up to the March 14th deadline. We'll have to probably pass a clean CR instead of separate approach bills. Why? Because the Democrats in Congress were trying to demand that as a condition of appropriations that we would somehow tie the hands of the president, limit his authority. Our goal is to make the tax cuts permanent, and we need to do that because it gives stability to people who are trying to make decisions long term. The devil's in the details is in every piece of legislation to find out how exactly to enact the savings that will allow us to do that. But I think we'll have enough room to do it. It starts Monday morning, but we've been doing the preparation for it for more than a year. So I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to accomplish this mission.
And that's the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, with me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures with the next steps on reconciliation ahead of the March 14th government shutdown deadline. Wyoming Senator Cynthia Loomis joined us last week here on how to make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent. Watch.
I think that the Senate is really focused on making the 2017 tax cuts permanent. And that would be something that the House bill does not yet do. So there needs to be discussions between House and Senate leaders and the White House to make sure we can make those cuts permanent and that then we can address some of the issues related to other entitlement programs.
So you could make the argument that you still need a two-track process here because you want to make the tax cuts permanent.
You got it. I do make that argument and support that argument.
Joining me now is former Speaker of the House and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. He's the author of the upcoming book, Trump's Triumph, which can be pre-ordered right now. Newt, great to see you. Congrats on the new book. That is a good one. You've told me the last time we were together that the tax bill needs to be on Trump's desk no later than the 4th of July. That's the absolute latest, unless if it doesn't impact the midterm elections. What are your thoughts here? Mike Johnson had a big victory getting that budget resolution passed last week, but the Senate makes the point, as you just heard from Cynthia Loomis, that their plan on two tracks makes the tax cuts permanent. How do you see it?
Be right back.
Well, I don't understand the Senate's point. I mean, if they've got a plan that makes the tax cut permanent, roll it into one bill and do it. There doesn't have to be two bills. I don't get it. The fact is that Speaker Johnson understands that he's part of a governing coalition. The Republican President, Donald Trump, the job of House and Senate Republicans is to find a way to get to yes. You know, when you're the opposition party, you find a way to get to no. And unfortunately, some of the House Republicans in particular got into that habit of saying no all the time. The victory the other day was really extraordinarily important. The bill was passed, one big, beautiful bill, as the president put it. Speaker Johnson got home all the way there. President Trump got the last few votes and put him over the top. There's no excuse for the Senate to not now look at how do we get the tax cuts. I'm happy if they can get them permanent. But we need to get them done so that the 2026 economy is dramatically stronger. We're sliding towards a recession. And that's just a fact. We've inherited, just as Reagan inherited Carter's bad economy, President Trump inherited Biden's bad economy. To power your way out of that bad economy, you need deregulation and tax cuts, and you need them in May, June, at the very latest, the 4th of July, so they have effect in 2026. That is vital if what we're trying to do is keep control of the House and not allow the Democrats to cripple the last 2 years of the Trump presidency with investigations, impeachments, all the things Nancy Pelosi did.
Yeah, and that's what I keep bringing up, the fact that, look, we're already looking at a situation where President Trump inherited a tough economy, but now with DOGE cutting jobs and slimming down the government, people are asking the question, does that induce a recession? You know, look at the GDP Now numbers. They're expecting a contraction in the first quarter.
Right, and look, I think there's a natural process here. If you want to, in fact, get spending under control, you're going to reduce the fiscal stimulation of the economy by government spending. On the other hand, you're going to start bringing down interest rates, and if you pass the tax cuts and the deregulation, you're going to create an environment where people want to create businesses, they want to be able to go out and hire people, and with the revolution that's coming in artificial intelligence, you're just going to see a continuing move in the direction of America being the most competitive society in the world.
Yeah.
But it has to happen quickly in order to keep the House Republican in 2026.
Yeah, you make the right point, and I know they're obviously thinking about this as well. So let's talk about tomorrow night. President Trump will address a joint session of Congress at 9 p.m. Eastern. Yesterday, Mike Johnson said, it's going to be fireworks, Maria. Democrats, however, are again planning this whole resist. I don't understand this. They're reportedly bringing guests, they claim, who have been, quote, harmed by the Trump administration's early actions, or those people who will be hurt by the House Republican budget. Not sure who they're referring to, but Michigan Senator Elisa Slotkin is set to deliver the official rebuttal from Democrats. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said that she's going to explain how Democrats are fighting to protect Social Security and Medicaid while Republicans are cutting taxes for billionaires and Elon Musk. Newt, how do you see it?
Well, look, they don't get it. The fact is the country believes government's too big. The country believes, in one Gallup poll, that almost 50% of federal spending is waste. The country believes that the system is corrupt. And certainly if you look at some of the things we're learning from DOGE, there's no question that, even I've been very shocked at some of the things we were paying for and some of the things that are pure waste. I think when you talk about, for example, Medicaid, there's a substantial amount of fraud. If you had the same level of fraud in Medicaid that you have with Visa or MasterCard or American Express, you would save hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, if the Democrats want to be the party that insists on paying crooks, and they want to be the party that insists on supporting waste, that's their prerogative. But the American people do not want to be told the government is so wonderful that it cannot be reformed, it cannot be touched. And I think the Democrats are walking into a blind canyon where they're going to end up looking like they don't understand the average American at all.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the resistance is going to be a lot harder this time around because people are onto it. They understand what President Trump and this administration is trying to do. But wow, what a blowout on Friday, dude. Did you watch it live? Zelensky claims now Ukraine is ready. Okay, so Zelensky claims he's ready to sign the rare earth minerals deal now after that explosive Oval Office meeting with the president. Trump says Zelensky will be welcome back to the White House when and if he is ready for peace. And Secretary Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, said as of now the deal is no longer on the table. Just in time for Zelensky says he's ready to sign. How do you see all of this?
Well, look, I actually thought that President Trump was very much behaving like President Eisenhower, who was very tough in negotiations, and who, frankly, was very tough on the Europeans, because Eisenhower was totally committed to America, and he was committed to reducing the fiscal burden of government, and he wanted to make sure that our allies did their fair share. I think that clearly Zelensky cheated on Friday. And if you look at the very opening, which the news media has not carried very much, well, Trump is happy, he is positive, this is going to be a great meeting, we're going to get this signed, it's a step towards peace. And then all of a sudden it turns out Zelensky is not there to sign it, he's there to negotiate in front of the cameras. And I think that President Trump and Vice President Vance both felt that they had been cheated and hoodwinked, and they would not have accepted the meeting if they'd understood that Zelensky was not going to sign. So I think Zelensky's in a deep hole. The Europeans cannot possibly replace America, and I think that he will have to come back to the table and have to sign something to regain the president's support.
Well, I mean, at a minimum, Trump got the Europeans to wake up, right? I mean, finally, they're saying, okay, we're going to come up with a peace plan and then show it to the United States. Zelensky spent the weekend, with the Europeans, first meeting with UK Prime Minister in London. So, at a minimum, that whole showdown got Europe to get involved.
Look, what we're going to discover very quickly is that the Europeans can issue
People are not taking this tariff thing seriously. I just came from the bank, and the teller that was looking after me, she told me that her husband lost his job yesterday. She said 15 of them were released from their job. They work in a steel plant a little outside of London here in a small town called Elma.
So we're already losing jobs to the Trump tariff threats. Some industries may be affected more than others, like the steel industry in Canada. There's already been some layoffs for that industry, which is kind of shocking considering a lot of these tariffs haven't really fully kicked in yet. But even the threat of these tariffs sometimes is enough to get countries and companies shaking. In fact, we've also lost a lot of companies in Canada since then as well, and it may get worse over the next few months.
I think to bring back to the tariffs, how is it going to hurt Canada concretely? So Canada, we have a population of 41 million. Out of 41 million, we have a workforce of 20.7 million people. Our current unemployment rate, by the way, which is insane to consider, is 6.8%. That is super high. That is no good, all right? So we're not doing good already. The tariffs could cause 1 to 2 million job loss, increasing further 3+ million if the tariffs increase to 50%. Let's go into something that we despise, you and I. 1 in 4 workers work for the government in Canada. So that means the private sector, the private workforce, is only 15 million people. If we take away 2 to 3 million private sector jobs from the 50 million base, we're talking a 20% private sector disappearing, gone overnight. That is catastrophic.
Think how scary that is. 1 in 4 people work for the Canadian government in some capacity in Canada, so their jobs will likely be protected. We're not going to have a similar situation in the United States where they had DOGE going through and actually finding which government sectors to actually lay off. It's going to be the opposite. Here in Canada, we just have companies saying, all right, bye, private sector, yeah, we don't like our money being here, we don't like our money in this country, see ya, peace out. And then they leave, and all of a sudden you have a massive unemployment problem in Canada, which we already do. 6.8% unemployment. That's like recession territory. That's really bad.
Hello. I just wanted to share this information, mostly for Canadians. People are not taking this tariff thing seriously. I just came from the bank, and the teller that was looking after me, she told me that her husband lost his job yesterday. She said 15 of them were released from their job. They work in a steel plant a little outside of London here in a small town called Elma. So she said, husband lost his job already. I said, already? Yes. So you know this is just the beginning. So people, when I start making noise about the tariffs, people are not taking me serious. But this is a serious thing. My son-in-law works in the car industry. My husband works in the alcohol industry. So, good thing I work in healthcare. My job is needed. But people are going to lose jobs. It's going to get terrible. Anyway, I'm heading out this weekend. Nobody asked me when, where, and where. So I'm going to take a little break. And when I come back, then the pressure will start.
And again, this is going to affect more of the private sector more than anything else. A lot of government jobs will be safe from these tariff threats, which is really horrible, because all that really means the government is going to grow in power as opposed to the private sector. The CBC article here says Quebec companies announce layoffs ahead of Trump tariffs. Sheartex, South Shore Furniture among major manufacturers to announce cuts, blaming tariff threats. Quebec manufacturers are announcing layoffs, saying U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated threats of tariffs, now expected to come into effect in a month, are already affecting sales. The U.S. is Quebec's top trading partner, with most manufacturers in the province trading and selling to the American companies and consumers. Montreal-based tights manufacturer Sheartex, now a publicly traded company, announced on LinkedIn Wednesday morning it would be temporarily laying off 40% of its 350 employees in preparation for the tariffs. And also, to name another company that just announced this recently, GameStop is also going to be closing its operations in Canada. That's a store that I'd probably go to at least once a month. I love their $5 Friday deals. Now I'm not going to get those $5 Friday deals. And a lot of these are due to the fact that companies are just not profitable in Canada, and we're also getting massive tariff threats.
Trump is claiming that he may put a 50 or 100% tariff on Canadian vehicles coming into the United States. And I want to talk briefly about how detrimental and unreasonable that would be to not only the Canadian economy, but also the U.S. economy. 80 to 85% of the vehicles that are manufactured in Canada get exported to the United States. We are the largest supplier of vehicles to the U.S., about $45 billion worth in 2023. Donald Trump is claiming that Canada stole the U.S. auto industry, which is just completely false. In Canada, Ford Motor Company, GM, Stellantis, Honda, and Toyota all manufacture vehicles in Canada. Ford started manufacturing in 1904 in Walkerville, Ontario. General Motors started manufacturing in 1918. Stellantis started manufacturing cars in the 1920s. Honda started manufacturing cars in 1986. And Toyota started in 1964. So we didn't steal the auto industry from the United States. We have been manufacturing vehicles for over 100 years for the United States. In Canada, there's about 125,000 workers directly tied to the auto industry. And in the United States, that number is about 600,000 workers that are directly tied to the Canadian auto industry.
Think of how many workers that is, and imagine all those jobs disappearing, which could be reality in the next few months. Global News says Canada's sugar candy industry could be hit hard by tariffs, experts say. Now they're even coming after our sweets. Canadian sugar and confectionery companies would be hit particularly hard if U.S. tariffs come into play, because most of the industry sales go south of the border. You know, the Americans love to eat some sweet food, that's for sure. Sugar and confectionery does stand out as one of those sectors, especially in the short term, that is very reliant on the U.S., therefore could see big impacts from U.S. tariffs, said Farm Credit Canada's senior economist Amanda Norris. The industry is one of Canada's most vulnerable agri-food sectors because more than 80% of the sales are to the U.S. There is still a lot of manufacturing done here in Canada. Obviously, we've probably lost a substantial amount of manufacturing over the last 2 decades, but there is a lot of cities that rely on these manufacturing jobs. And this next video is interesting because it breaks down the cities that would be affected the most by these tariffs if these tariffs hit.
We wondered what cities will be hit hardest as the tariffs come in. It's called the Tariff Exposure Index. Number 1 being St. John's, New Brunswick, Calgary, and Windsor. Let me explain.
St. John's, New Brunswick, because they export energy to the United States. Calgary, because they also export energy and beef to the United States. And Windsor is the corridor for all the auto parts that are coming in from Guelph, St. Thomas, Cambridge, London area. So you've seen a couple of the factories close down just yesterday with GM laying off 79 people. And so the house of cards is now tumbling. If you don't think the tariffs are real and they're impactful, you're dead wrong, because they are going to decimate our economy. Look at these index numbers: 131% exposure, 81% exposure, and 61% exposure, respectively. It's time to rethink our leadership in this government, because they're doing nothing about it. And Canada needs something done immediately.
Yeah, that is brutal to see some of these numbers. And I, unfortunately, live in Calgary, so I had the place of the second most exposure to the Trump tariff threats, which is really bad because obviously the beef and the energy that is being exported down to the United States and Canada from that particular province. This is brutal, guys. Let me know your thoughts about it down below in the video's comment section, because it's definitely one that's going to be affecting a lot of people here in Canada, and even if you're watching from the United States, this is something that's going to be affecting both parties as well. Anyways, hope you enjoyed, learned something today, and I will see you guys in the next video.
It was my first time using Magic. I thought I only had the skill plus. I didn't know I had, I didn't even know I had Magic. It was more just an experiment.
Just days after the 47th president widely watched smackdown of Ukrainian President Zelensky in the Oval Office, Mexico, Canada, China, and Europe move into the president's sights. Friday, a show of strength and a message to Ukraine and to Europe. Pony up, or America walks.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't have friends. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people say they should have.
Now, Mexico, Canada, and China await Trump's promised tariffs this upcoming Tuesday for their failure to end the flow of deadly fentanyl into America, which has claimed hundreds of thousands of American lives. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has even gone as far as raising the prospect of U.S. troops on the ground in Mexico to take on the deadly drug cartels. But first, President Trump will impose a 25% tariff on both Mexico and Canada, and another 10% tariff on China, taking its planned tariff to China to 20% after an initially announced 10% last month, all beginning this upcoming Tuesday. President Trump is also planning to implement reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd on all other countries deemed by the administration to have been treating the United States unfairly. Among the countries the White House is targeting, India, Japan, and the European Union, with the EU facing a U.S. response beyond just unfair trade, but to reciprocate against Europe's VAT tax and its fees and lawsuits against American companies. Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Feature exclusive is the nation's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Secretary, great to have you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here, Maria.
Well, Secretary, you were sitting across from the president on Friday. Before we get to tariffs, I want to get your reaction to what went down. How was it in the room? And do you believe Democrats were egging on Zelensky to not say thank you, to stay tough and not sign that rare earth minerals deal?
No, so we were 40 minutes before the cameras came in and 45 minutes before the meltdown. And the fact was Zelensky never stopped asking for, I will give no concessions. They've got to leave my land.
I want reparations of $300 billion. And I want the United States to give me security guarantees while they're at war with Russia. And that's why the president called it World War III. You're gambling with World War III. We're not going to give you security guarantees while you're at war with Russia. It's just ridiculous. His requests were ridiculous. They were not reasonable. The president let it go for a while, he was there to make peace. Our president is there to make peace. As he said, end the deaths. And Zelensky was not there to make peace. He was there to strike some sort of make-believe bargain that he had in his mind. And eventually that just ran its course. And Donald Trump said, I can't take this nonsense anymore, and made it crystal clear he's the peacemaker, and if Zelensky's not interested in peace, then he should go home and think about it.
And that's what happened. He was asked to leave. I don't know exactly the language President Trump used, but he said, get the heck out of here. Do you think that Zelensky had met with Democrats before meeting with Trump, and basically they told him, stay firm, don't give in to anything, don't do the rare earth minerals deal?
I can't imagine that. I hope not. I mean, that would be dreadful. So the fact is the president just wants to make peace. He tried to make peace. We had a beautiful lunch arranged. We had a signing, tables all set up. This was designed to be beautiful, right? And instead we had lunch by ourselves without the Zelensky crowd there, because they just did not come for peace. And our president's there, as he said, to end the death and to create peace. And that's who Donald Trump is, and he knows how to do it. He even said, you have to be reasonable to Putin. You can't say, Putin's a terrorist and then call the guy up and try to make peace with him. So you have to play balance. Donald Trump knows how to be a mediator. He knows how to arbitrate this, and he needs Zelensky on side, and Zelensky needs to hear it directly from the funding mouth of the United States of America. We're not going to give you money unless you're here for peace.
And now we've got the tariffs beginning on Tuesday against Mexico, Canada, and China. China has already said it's going to retaliate. Are you expecting American goods prices to go higher in the short term, given the fact that this looks like a fight here as well?
Well, look, we care about two things, right? The March 4th is about the border, and both Mexico and Canada have done a reasonable job on the border. They're both working hard on the border. We've had the lowest crossings ever under Donald Trump because of his ability to negotiate with Canada and Mexico. But the fentanyl continues to come into this country and continues to murder our people. And the ingredients are made in China. They're sent to Mexico and Canada, and then they come and attack our country, and that's got to end. So the president's been crystal clear on those 2 points. They have done a lot, so he's sort of thinking about right now how exactly he wants to play it with Mexico and Canada, and that is a fluid situation. There are going to be tariffs on Tuesday on Mexico and Canada. Exactly what they are, we're going to leave that for the president and his team to negotiate, and obviously I'm talking to him all the time to discuss what that's going to be on Tuesday. But China's got to stop making these ingredients. Remember, in 2019, the Chinese told President Trump at that time that they would put the death penalty on anybody who made fentanyl. And today, they're giving the maximum subsidy they possibly can to the people making those ingredients. So the Chinese need to stop this murder of Americans, and Donald Trump is the only president who protects the American people.
Well, it sounds like President Trump knows exactly his customer in China and is dealing with that. But in terms of Mexico and Canada, what I think I hear is there is some room here. Maybe 25% tariff doesn't go into effect on Tuesday. Maybe he's able to negotiate it down, given that they have shown some willingness to help on the border.
They've done a very reasonable job on the border. I mean, I spoke to Tom Homan yesterday, and he was very optimistic about the kind of work that Mexico and Canada are doing on the border, lowest crossings ever. So in that regard, they've done an excellent job, but they just haven't moved on the fentanyl deaths in America, and that's one of those key things protecting the lives of Americans. So the president is thinking about it. I think there are going to be tariffs on Tuesday on Mexico and Canada. Exactly what they're going to be, I'm going to leave that for the president to decide. He's got great advisors. I'm obviously at the table with him, and so are others. He's going to think about it.
Eugene, from Democrats, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, plan to bring guests affected by Trump's cuts and the message. On the other hand, you have Senator Chris Murphy, who's skipping the speech altogether. Here's his reasoning.
I think that State of the Union speech is going to be a farce. I think it's going to be a MAGA pep rally, not a serious talk to the nation. I think Donald Trump is going to spew a series of lies about his alignment with Russia, about what he's trying to do to allow Elon Musk to essentially monetize the American government to enrich Musk's billionaire crowd. And I'm just not going to be a part of that.
Eugene, which approach do Democratic voters want to see?
You know, I think what Democratic voters want to see is a fight, right? They seem to feel like the party is listless, that they don't have a clear message, and you can see in the different approaches that Schumer and Murphy are taking, many other Democrats, trying to figure out what that message actually is and how you navigate that, right? You can see that whether or not Democrats are going to have actual negotiations in the House, especially about what the CR, the continuing resolution, will be to fund the government. How do they engage with that? So all of this is the party trying to figure out how they fight with Donald Trump and make clear to voters where they stand, but at the same time try to figure out how to look like this opposition party, but also an alternative. How do you actually look like a party that has something to offer people, not just a party that's throwing away, throwing up their hands and walking away from the table? And it's unclear which one will actually work, right? And the thing that I keep hearing from Democrats is they're hoping that the Doge thing continues to make Americans angry, that veterans who are getting impacted by this, that people hear that and have issues with it, but they also can't wait for those things to happen. They have to push some of these things along, and they also most importantly have to break through in a way that it gets down to voters. And these town halls that we're starting to see are a way to do that, but they still have a long road ahead before they actually get a message that's very clear for voters.
And we're getting a little pulse of the people heading into this speech with some mixed messages for President Trump in at least the latest polling. A new CBS poll finding +2 net approval for those Trump staff cuts within the margin of error on 3 key issues. Take a look at this. Immigration. Trump is net +8 on the economy. He's +2 within the margin of error. Inflation -8. Congressman, what's the takeaway? And would you expect tomorrow's address to focus more on the price of eggs and less on food?
I think tomorrow night is going to be Trump in all his glory. He's going to declare a mandate in the most successful 100 days the country has ever seen. The problem is both of those things are lies. Last November, more Americans voted for someone other than Donald Trump than voted for the president. He got less than 50% of the vote. Many of his most aggressive moves are actually unpopular. And what Democrats are wrestling with is a president, when he addresses a joint session, kind of commands the entire stage, commands the media cycle. And so do Democrats kind of play foil to that, or do they have an ability to counter? And I think that's where, on many of the things, as Senator Murphy said, Donald Trump will be lying. On many things, he will espouse values that are antithetical, as Ambassador McFaul just said in your last segment, to American values. So my take is Donald Trump is a guest in the People's House. That is not his chamber tomorrow night. That chamber belongs to the Congress. The lower house is the People's House. And perhaps House Democrats should invite him in and treat Donald Trump like Donald Trump treated Zelensky. Let him hear it when he lies and when he confronts American values. Be a part of the discourse tomorrow night. Do not simply enable him, which I know Democrats are not looking to do, but engage in the combat. Because as Eugene was talking about, this is a moment where Democrats are looking for the opportunity to stand up and fight and energize their voters. Tomorrow night might be that chance.
Meantime, behind the scenes, Aaron, many federal workers weren't sure how to respond to that initial Doge email demanding that they list the prior week's accomplishments. Now, round 2 of that email's gone out.
Yeah, that second "what did you do last week" email started going out. It was late Friday afternoon, just as federal workers here on the East Coast were ending their workday. Again, they were asked to list 5 accomplishments from the previous week. And at this time, that email did include a request to send a similar email every Monday by midnight. Last time there was a lot of confusion, as you noted, about whether workers should respond, whether it was mandatory to respond. Several agencies told their employees to hold off on responding or not to respond at all. This time, though, at least the Secretary of Defense took to social media directing his workers to comply. Watch.
I am now directing each member of the department's civilian workforce, just civilian, to provide those 5 bullets on what they accomplished in their specific jobs last week, to reply to that email and CC their immediate supervisor. It's a simple task, really, as Elon said, as the president recognized in our first cabinet meeting, just a pulse check.
And we know that President Trump has suggested he would like to have people respond to that, that there could be folks who were fired as a result of not responding potentially. And we'll be waiting to see today, Anna, if agencies roll out additional guidance to that email that came out from OPM over the course of the weekend.
All right, Aaron Gilchrist, thanks for the reporting. Over the weekend, we saw the protests at national parks, and federal workers had really laid into this administration. Comments to the media recently, one staffer had telling NBC, what they've done is they've radicalized me. What they've done is they've taken someone who would have willingly served under their administration to help all of the American people, and what they've done is they've made me think that they want to destroy the republic. They want to destroy democracy. So now I am activated. Eugene, career federal workers usually pride themselves in being apolitical, willing to work under any administration. What do you see as the significance of this growing worker backlash?
It shows that some of them, many of them, probably see this as bigger than the roles that they played, right? Many of these folks, some of them have been serving for 20, 30 years under different presidents, under different administrations, and most importantly, under different parties. And I think it's hard kind of to explain to folks that kind of selflessness in the world we live in that is so partisan, but that is something, as you said, that they've prided themselves on for so long. You know, Politico is reporting right now that there are allies around Donald Trump that are worried that the kind of blowback to Doge that we're starting to see, it's unclear how big it is, how big it could get, but that blowback is going to blow back on the president, right? President Trump has held Elon Musk very close. He's talked about Doge, has defended Doge and the cuts in the operation that they're doing, but the chaos it's creating, the speed at which it's happening, is where people are having their issues. And I think, you know, conservatives have for years wanted to shrink the size of the federal government, but when you do it at this speed and what feels like to a lot of folks in kind of a reckless way, where there doesn't seem to be a plan for after, and also accusing everyone that is getting fired of having been party to waste, fraud, and abuse, that is where folks, even Republicans I'm speaking to, have issues with what's happening with Doge. And that blowback is starting to build, and whether or not that blows back on the president is the biggest part of this.
Yeah, Congressman Jolly, we're seeing more angry town halls in red states. Over the weekend, Speaker Johnson just seemingly dismissed those without evidence, claiming it was all paid outside agitators who were coming in. How should Republicans be handling this?
Well, I think for Republicans right now, you're getting away with lawlessness, and I think that's the underlying issue here, is so much that Donald Trump is doing, as we're seeing in the courts, is actually outside his authority. I think we're Democrats, though, and this is important. Republicans are along for the ride. They want to cut government. They've clearly said they don't care if Donald Trump is stepping outside of his authority or if Elon Musk has been empowered to be a co-president in this situation. I think for Democrats, there's a simple nuance that's really important, though. So Donald Trump is substantively breaking something he won't be able to fix, many of our federal services. The issue for Democrats is not to grab onto the compassionate stories of people who have lost their jobs. Those are important. Those are important in a lot of communities. Donald Trump should not be doing this. But most Americans would say if we can reduce the workforce of the federal government, let's do it. The issue is a reduction in services. And I think that's where there's some latency for the American people to realize there's trouble coming. The VA just canceled one of their largest VA health records interoperability contracts, 10 years in the making. The contractors who just got laid off are feeling that. The veterans are not feeling that yet. And so I think for Democrats to grab onto an issue, it's about the disruption of services that are coming. Make the argument that the cuts right now are short-sighted, but prepare for the big impact when the American people realize their government no longer works for them.
All right, thank you both so much for joining us. Eugene, congrats on your new role. Excited to see more of you here on MSNBC.
The Special Security and Surveillance Patrol isn't involved in regular patrol duties around Fontaine. The people we're after aren't exactly the type who just pop up on the street.
So I want to encourage Pennsylvanians to speak up, to use their voices, to do it constructively, to not retreat. This is a moment to make your voices heard.
Some extreme members of the Michigan legislature are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality. Here's my response to that. Hell no.
I'm here to say New York hasn't labored under a king in over 250 years. It sure as hell are not going to start now.
My oath is to the Constitution of our state and of our country. We don't have kings in America, and I don't intend to bend the knee to one. Tyranny requires your fear and your silence and your compliance. Democracy requires your courage.
They are right now and will continue to be some of the most essential and trusted voices of dissent and opposition in this brand new era. Governors, Democratic governors in state houses all across the country. It'll be up to them largely and others to continue to give voice to the American people who see something profoundly wrong with what is happening, not just in these first few weeks, but most likely over the next 4 years. It's a privilege to bring in Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Nicole.
We played a whole bunch of your State of the State address. I want to play one more piece of sound before we jump into this.
All right, now it's got that nice.
If you think I'm overreacting and sounding the alarm too soon, consider this. It took the Nazism 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours, and 40 minutes to dismantle a constitutional republic. And all I'm saying is that when the 5-alarm fire starts to burn, every good person better be ready to man a post with a bucket of water if you want to stop it from raging out of control.
Yours is an assessment I've heard from former senior national security officials, but only privately, and you're the only one to say it publicly. Say more about your decision to do that.
Well, I should start by saying that my family escaped the pogroms in Ukraine in the 1880s, and it was when the Russians were coming to kill Jews. And this country, the United States, provided us with the security, safety, opportunity to, well, just to live. And of course, I should point out that it was a public school that gave my great-grandfather an education, and a public service, a public health agency that gave them a place to live. And so I am very grateful to be an American and believe very much in protecting all the rights of the American people. I also built a Holocaust museum with Holocaust survivors here, and I can tell you that in 1933 and 1934, the German Constitutional Republic was converted into a dictatorship in a very short period of time. And anybody who walks through a Holocaust museum and sees the chronology can see that when rights get taken away, when the services to people are diminished, when all of a sudden we're favoring one group of people over another, that's a danger that we ought to all pay attention to. I'm seeing that in this country right now, and I needed to speak up. I needed people to hear that. And I think that, we're seeing gradually an understanding that we've got to speak up. People need to show up and speak out.
What is it like to be a Democratic leader in a moment when the people, the only people, standing up for the rule of law, in terms of elected officials, and the Constitution, and rights, basically, equal rights, are Democratic leaders?
Yeah. I'm concerned. People need to speak up now. It's not later. There needs to be a wake-up call. And I do see, you played some of the video and clips from other governors, but it's the people that they represent that are speaking out, showing up at town hall meetings, that are going to make the biggest difference. Meanwhile, you need to see Democratic leadership on this subject. And by the way, Republican leadership, there are plenty of Republicans out there that do not agree with what's going on in Washington, D.C. Now, the elected representatives in Washington who are Republicans are apparently too afraid to say in public what they say in private. they know that Donald Trump is off in the wrong direction. They're just afraid. They're afraid to lose their elections. Democrats shouldn't be afraid. We've got to speak up right now.
Can Democrats protect the rule of law in America by themselves?
You know, it's going to take the judges who are hearing these cases in court. It's going to take Democrats taking those cases to court. It's going to take average folks out there showing up and protesting. Remember what's happening, and you've been talking about this on the program, what's happening to the federal agencies. Now, that's not necessarily a matter of rights, as we would refer them, but, you know, when you lose the ability to see the person, you know, when you're a veteran, to see the therapist that you've seen for the entire time you've been under therapy as a result of the fact that you've served in a war and just need a little bit of help. When you lose that, when you lose, as is happening in my state, we're losing our meat and poultry inspectors. Remember, if you are in the meat and poultry industry, you're trying to sell your goods. You can't sell them if nobody's inspecting them. And by the way, when you go to the grocery store and your prices go up because the supply chain is broken, or when there's contaminated meat or poultry on the shelves because we don't have any more inspectors, those are the rights. Those are the things that people expect to see, and they're not seeing them. And again, we've got to do so much more to speak up and let everybody know across the country that what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing is wrong for them, bad for working class and working families across the United States, and bad for the most vulnerable people.
I like to always stipulate that it is not the Democratic Party's fault that we are here, but my old party has collapsed onto itself. You have former doctors like Senator Cassidy voting for RFK Jr. You have former prosecutors voting for folks who are not coy about their disdain for the rule of law. So I just want to put that out as pretext. But I went back and I watched your speech and a bunch of other addresses from the Democratic Convention, including Adam Kinzinger's. And all of the things that you and Republicans warned would come to pass have come to pass. Why do you think those warnings didn't sink in the time frame of an election?
You know, you got to remember that the things that I'm speaking out about now, about, you know, the threat to our democracy, this is not a message to win elections on. It's something people need to know. They need to know that that's happening. But, you know, if you talk to 100 people, knock on 100 doors, and I've knocked on an awful lot of doors running for office, and you say to people, you know, democracy is at risk, nobody knows what that looks like. They've never experienced it before.
Yes.
And the reality is what people need to hear about is what the effects of that are. The prices at the grocery store are going up because democracy is being taken away. The impact on you in terms of your health care, 770,000 people in Illinois will lose health care as a result of what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the Republican Congress are doing right now. It's a danger to your way of life. And that's what people need to understand. It's all about affordability. It's all about how you can, you know, make it just a little bit easier for people every single day to live their lives. And they're taking that away from you. That is what it's like to have democracy taken away. So those are, you know, we need to bifurcate between educating people about democracy being taken away and talking to people about what the message ought to be about why they need to vote for Democrats.
It's so interesting. I mean, you're right. That is sort of the linkage that was maybe missing, and frankly, it's on the media as well. I wonder if you have any insights about what your constituents are going through that could inform the debates in Washington or the coverage on shows like this.
Well, you know, I went to visit a Head Start program in the suburbs here, suburbs of Chicago, and they had to lay a few people off as a result of the uncertainty of whether they would see the support from the federal government that they've always received. And when they have to lay people off, that means fewer kids can be in their program. And when fewer kids are in the program, that means their parents who can't go to work because their child can't go to that program. Now, there are layoffs that are occurring, and they're devastating, layoffs to government workers. But what about the layoffs that are affecting average folks out there that don't work for the government because they can't get child care, because they can't get the services that they need. It's devastating to families across Illinois and across America. And slowly, but surely, I think people are waking up to see it. But all of us, especially in leadership, need to stand up and speak out and, put the red blinking lights, red alert, like on Star Trek. We are under attack. All of us across the United States, everybody is under attack because they want to take services away. You know why? To provide a massive tax cut for the wealthiest and most powerful people in this country. That just seems wrong, and everybody needs to understand it in order to make sure that that they get the impetus to get out there, show up at your town hall meeting, call 202-224-3121. That's the number for the Capitol, and ask to speak with your congressman's office or your senator's office and tell them, don't take my services away. Don't take away Meals on Wheels. Don't take away Medicaid.
Nice and cooked, and now we're going to deep fry it to give it that nice outside crust. So let's try to put it in the front end here.
Well, 4 years ago, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has spent his entire adult life trading on and profiting from his famous father's name, wrote, quote, American and global consumers of measles vaccines will learn that they have been misled by the pharmaceutical industry and their captured government agency allies into believing that measles is a deadly disease. Some mothers believed Robert Kennedy Jr. when he told them not to worry about measles. Some fathers believed Robert Kennedy Jr. And tonight in Texas, a child is dead because of the lies told and advanced around the world by Robert Kennedy Jr. The victim killed by measles is described only as a school-aged child. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has vaccinated his own children, lies about measles and about vaccines. And those lies are what propelled him into a seat in the cabinet room today, where his famous father once occupied the Attorney General's seat during cabinet meetings, with his famous uncle, John F. Kennedy, occupying the president's seat in those same cabinet meetings. That was the 1960s. In the cabinet room today, Robert Kennedy Jr. showed not the slightest sign of being even slightly moved by it.
You say, oh, he treats me like I'm dumb. Yeah. You're really going to let, no offense, him manage the entire finances? Look where you guys are.
That is a good question.
He just says, I don't want to get a
that I told you that when I was typed in.
All of your debt is substantially worse than her debt. You are the one holding back the boat. You are the anchor, holding you guys in the middle of a big storm. Download my new Simpler Budget app today and take control of your money once and for all.
Hi, my name is Travis. I'm 30.
And I'm Kelsey. I'm 27. We live in Montgomery, Texas.
Download my new today and take control of our studio. Let's start with you. What are you doing at 30 years old? Travis. We use fake themes here, so it was a teenage.
The musket is my favorite weapon. It's both powerful and threatening.
What are you doing?
Sometimes the latter trait is far more useful.
Oh, okay. We could use here. How much you making? Probably not much.
65,000.
Actually, better than I thought. Okay. I know a lot of people in the arts, not how we do it. I like to, incentivize them with lots of bonuses and whatever. But a lot of people in the arts, they
sorry, not production like this kind of production, like a manufacturer.
That makes more sense. Okay, cool. So $65,000 a year. My government taxes how big is it now? That's a living.
Well, it's
a suburb of an actual place.
No, it's a town. It's outside of town. Yeah, it's in Texas.
Wow. I'm thrilled. And what do you do for a living?
I work at a country club. I manage a front desk and usually guest services manager.
You do guest services. Sure. With that volume of voice. At a front desk in a public place.
Yes. I am much more louder when somebody.
Be much more louder here. I haven't even yelled yet. It hasn't even occurred. So, how much do you make in that job?
I am hourly. I make $20.50
an hour. Not bad. And how many hours a week do you work?
Typically between 40 and 45.
So what would you say hits your account on a monthly basis?
The Special Security and Surveillance Patrol isn't involved in regular patrol duties around Fontaine.
Well, what are you answering
The
for?
people we're after aren't exactly the type who just pop up on the
What is
street.
this to do? What the why are you looking at him and go math and then he knows the answer? This is interesting.
Mostly because I do not know.
Well, why would you not know?
That is a good question.
I would love a semblance of a decent answer.
Okay, so I'm not very good with like the financials or budgeting or
This
money
is
or
not even about budgeting. You don't know what your paycheck is?
The 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada are set to go into effect. Some Canadian coffee shops are responding by changing the name of Americano drink. Canadiano.
Sometimes the latter trait is
Kevin
far
O'Leary
more
joins me.
useful.
Seems like Canadians are really united against America. How can we get the relationship back on track after this?
Well, actually, this reaction in Canada has mostly to do with the constant barbs that Trump is throwing at Trudeau, who's still in power for another 22 days. There's a very negative relationship there, and it's just gotten worse because Trudeau has been putting out posts while he's in Europe, stirring up anti-Trump sentiment. These guys never liked each other, and Trudeau has nothing to lose. He's been basically kicked out by his party, so he's just in his last days, causing a tremendous amount of angst. And so Trump keeps going with let's buy it as the 51st state, and that has made Canadians crazy. But the truth is that is not being discussed at all. That's not part of the actual narrative that's occurring as we speak, Stuart, in Washington, D.C. Because there's no leadership in Canada at the federal level, there's no active prime minister that's relevant. It's a void. And so what's occurred is all of the premiers of the different provinces that have different agendas. Ontario is different than Alberta, for example. They're the giant behemoths in terms of economies, and Saskatchewan for energy as well. They're down with their teams trying to focus on a new deal, if you want to call it NAFTA 3. There's a slight chance this whole thing gets punted till April 2nd after the report comes out on the impact of tariffs on Canada and Mexico. But this nationalism in Canada is the noise. It's not the signal.
Got it. I want your take on the Zelensky and Trump spat in the Oval Office last Friday. What was your take on the very tense backwards and forwards?
These kinds of discussions over the generations of leaders, whether it's as far back as the First World War, have always occurred. The difference here is no one's ever seen sausage being made. And so this is a very transparent administration. Trump has just been very open. And you saw for the first time in modern times what really goes on behind closed doors. Now, you may not like it, but that is nothing new. And so, frankly, having the cameras there, that's just Trump's style. And he's not changing. I get it. But what's on the table here is very interesting. Because as a result of that, you saw the British step up on Sunday and put in billions in equipment and spending. Trump has been needling NATO to put more money.
Aren't exactly the type who just pop up on the street.
Canadians are waiting nervously to find out if President Trump will follow through on his threat to impose.
Oh, Feastos are just the best snack. They're easy to carry with you and go with so many sauces. Actually, I'm gonna go buy some.
For decades, construction supplies, drywall, appliances, lumber, and steel have traveled more or less freely between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. That's likely changing on March 12th.
This is the beginning of making America rich again.
Canadian steel and aluminum is expected to get hit with 25% tariffs in the U.S. Last year, the U.S. imported 6 million tons of steel and 3.2 million tons of aluminum from Canada, more than any other country. And while that will make things more expensive for Americans, it's also going to make it more expensive for Canadians.
Any new construction will be affected by increased material costs from those items sourced from the U.S. that are subject to a tariff.
Because here's the thing, steel doesn't always just go over the border once. The Canadian and American steel industries are intricately linked. Canada might produce the raw materials and send them to the U.S. to become a beam, which may then get sent back to Canada. It's similar to the auto industry.
You hear about how a part will cross the border, 8 times before it ends up in a finished product. We have a lot of fabricators that do work in the United States. They will source their wide flange or I-beam from the United States, fabricate it here, and then ship it back into the United States for a project there.
So in the middle of a housing crisis, these tariffs and the threat of more are likely going to raise the cost of any new build or even stop new projects from happening.
We're already behind in catching up on supply. This will make it worse. And with material costs now increasing, a lot of projects that might go ahead may just be shelved again.
And that's just the start, because this could get a whole lot more complicated.
Our response, of course, will be firm and clear.
Right. Canada plans to retaliate, potentially slapping tariffs on a whole bunch of products that come from the U.S.
If there are retaliatory tariffs, then there's a multiplier effect on those costs as well, because what happens if there, at some point, there's a threat of a tariff on lumber or gypsum or cement? You start with one, and then it will just start, snowballing.
Check out this list the Canadian government published earlier this month about what it would be willing to tariff. On it, pretty much everything you need to build a house or a high-rise building. Lumber, concrete, windows, shingles, and of course, steel. And pretty quickly, a lot of those products could get a whole lot more.
It's both powerful and
now, builders could try and buy locally. That might work in some cases, but thanks to those highly integrated supply chains, when it comes to multi-unit construction, so everything from low-rise to high-rise buildings, in many cases, there isn't another option but to buy materials from the U.S. Take that I-beam that goes across the border. They support floors, roofs, and walls in both residential and commercial buildings. You can't build without them. And the kicker? Most of them are produced in the U.S.
We use thousands of tons of wide flange beams to form the structure and the skeleton of a building. All of that would be imported from the United States.
So factor in that more expensive I-beam and every apartment and condo building under construction.
Well, the price of everything will go up.
Loomis says it would take several years and billions of dollars for manufacturers to pivot and produce them en masse in Canada. And that's just one steel product. If all those other construction materials were tariffed as well,
We have no idea where that would stop. Anything that is in high demand going into home construction, cement, rebar, things like that, if there are tariffs that are hitting those, it's just going to continue to drive their costs up if it goes on for too long, because there's just no choice. Builders are going to have to stop.
now this has not happened yet, and it's not clear that it will. But just the threat alone is already having an impact on builders and the construction industry.
Lenders are going to be nervous about how can their particular customer go ahead and start building something when they don't even know what the cost is going to be of the material that they're going to source 18 months from now. That's a big problem, and it's possibly going to drive investment capital elsewhere.
Because many large apartment and condo buildings are planned years in advance, and the budgeting that goes into them has to be as specific and as precise as possible.
It's itemized down to almost the last nut and bolt.
building a model based on everything in flux doesn't give you a great outcome.
And there are a couple problems with this situation. One is that the cost of buying or renting that unit when it's completed skyrockets because of all these new costs in the building process. So when a buyer comes to purchase a condo or a renter to rent, they just can't afford it. The uncertainty surrounding all of this, says Michael Brooks, is already leading to canceled projects.
It is fear of the unknown, and that may be the bigger problem than just the computation of the dollar impact, is that loss of confidence.
They look at those projects that they might have on their drawing board, they may no longer be economically viable.
And for a country already in a housing crisis, where analysts say we need millions of new housing units in the next few years, lack of building today means fewer homes just a few years down the road.
So it's possible that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
As mentioned, those U.S. tariffs are scheduled to come into effect tomorrow, although it is still not clear whether they will be at the 25% level initially suggested. University of Calgary economist Trevor Tombe joining us this morning. Trevor, thank you as always for your time. We appreciate it. And I guess let's just start with, if these do go into effect at midnight, how will this functionally work, and how is the money collected?
Well, tariffs are taxes that a country levies on imports. And so these would be taxes that the United States government levies on American consumers and businesses when they import products from Canada. And now, how that's split in terms of the economic implications between them and us kind of depends on the product. Most of the things that we send to the U.S. will feel that in the form of slightly lower demand for the things that we used to provide to them as consumers there shift into other things. But some products, and I think like oil in the Alberta context, those producers might themselves take a haircut on the price that they would have otherwise have charged, effectively absorbing some of the costs. And so this, while a tax on Americans, does have some pretty big implications for Canada's economy, both in the short term with producers taking a lower price, and the longer term as demand for our goods and services declines.
Yeah, is there a sense of how quickly these impacts are typically felt?
So we don't have, unfortunately, a lot of experience with this, or I should say, fortunately, we don't have a lot of experience with this. You have to go back about 50 years to find another comparable moment when the U.S. levied such tariffs, and even then, our trading relationship was very different. So we don't really know, but a lot of analysts, some modeling that I've done, some of the major financial institutions and others suggest that the short-term effects would be fairly muted, but as the months go on, then demand declines, output in Canada falls, and unemployment rises. If it is a 25% across the board on goods and 10% on energy, and we should have in mind that the unemployment rate might rise in Canada by about 3%, but it would take until about the end of the year for that full effect to be felt. So if these are just very short-term tariffs, then the economic disruption might be minimal, but if they last for months or longer, then we'll start to see those costs mount.
And how is the sort of, I guess, some of the indecision, it seems, on the part of the Trump administration play into this? They're going to be enacted, they're not going to be enacted, it will come on this date, it will come on that date, it'll be 25%, it won't be. How does all that sort of indecision play into this?
Well, it plays in two ways. First, I think it shows that there are at least some cooler heads in the U.S. administration, because these kind of broad tariffs would dramatically affect U.S. production and supply chains. And about 4 out of every $5 that we trade between the two countries is in the form of capital goods and intermediates, not goods that you and I consume at the end of the day. And so tariffs can be fairly disruptive. So I think there's some hesitation on the part of the U.S. to actually follow through on across-the-board tariffs. And I suspect that if we do see tariffs by tomorrow, that it may not be broad. It might be a little bit more targeted, or maybe a slightly lower rate to ensure that whole manufacturing plants producing vehicles in particular in the U.S. don't themselves shut down.
Okay.
But then second, I think it kind of also shows that the high level of uncertainty that exists, that itself creates an economic challenge for Canada. The threats of the tariff makes businesses think twice before investing or expanding existing facilities, and that has real economic implications for Canada right now, whether the tariffs occur or not.
I'll be on pins and needles to see if they actually do. As always, very much appreciate your insight, Trevor. That is University of Calgary economist Trevor Tombe.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Having campaigned on a promise to fix everything, 5 weeks in the Trump administration, and things are looking like they're breaking. From eggs to housing prices. And rather ironically today, Donald Trump hosted the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, at the White House for the first time. The guy who came into power after a decade and a half of conservative rule and knows a thing or two about inheriting a bad economy. Keir Starmer is now the man trying to claw his country out of a deep economic hole. A hole dug in 2016 when the country narrowly voted in favor of Brexit.
The historic decision by British voters for their country to exit the European Union sent economic shockwaves from the UK to the US and a tidal wave of economic worries swamping the markets. The Dow lost over 3% of its value, wiping out all its gains for the year. The EU, established to bring unity and greater economic clout to Europe, is in crisis as Europe, the US, and the rest of the world absorb the profound ramifications.
Now, that right-wing plan to abandon the EU and the euro was sold as a way for Brits to take control over their own economy, even as experts warned it would drive up prices, as well as tanking the British pound, along with trade, salaries, and employment. The experts were right. Brexit was a disaster for the UK, setting back one of the world's strongest economies by years. Even many advocates of Brexit admitted it failed. It has been so bad that a poll last month showed that 55% of British people said their country was wrong to leave the EU. Only 30% had no regrets. It was a completely self-inflicted shock to the entire country and its populace. They are still recovering from almost a decade later. Back in 2016, of course, Donald Trump frequently campaigned on being the guy to bring Brexit to the U.S.
Well, they call me Mr. Brexit over there, so we'll see what happens. The UK wanted independence, and they got it. And you know what? I think they're going to be better off for it, and it's turning out, now it's a very short period of time, but it's turning out to be better so far.
No, the opposite, in fact. Now, Mr. Brexit is at it again. There's a growing fear that Trump's election is basically our own version of that catastrophe for the UK in 2016. Trump is pursuing a similarly radical economic agenda, one that economists and other experts warn will leave the U.S. to ruin. Today, we got a lot of signs the American economy is somewhat suddenly trending in the wrong direction, and that Trump could soon make it much, much worse. Trump announcing his long-promised tariffs on Canada and Mexico will go into effect next Tuesday. We'll see if that happens. Also, with additional new tariffs on China, another 10%. Now, if that happens, and again, been sort of futzing around with this, but all of it will jack up the prices Americans pay for goods imported from those countries. Mexico, our biggest trading partner. Those tariffs, essentially new double-digit sales taxes that you will pay, will drive inflation higher. There will be tariffs in exchange to those other countries for our imports, force a lot of people to cut back their spending. That's worrying the country's top economists. Today, the chairman of the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank, Jeffrey Schmidt, warned the Fed might have to keep interest rates high to fight price inflation, even as economic growth slows and possibly stops. Dreaded scenario known as stagflation, something the U.S. hasn't had to worry about since the 1970s. Now, last year, economists were talking about how many times the Fed might cut interest rates. Now they may go higher. That, along with inflated prices, is killing an already tight housing market. Listen to this. This really blew my mind. Today, the National Association of Realtors announced that pending home sales dropped 5% last month to their lowest level since the group started collecting those statistics in 2001. Think about that. Pending home sales today.
For joining us. The wait continues to see if U.S. President Donald Trump will follow through with his threat to impose steep tariffs on Canada. The 25% duty on almost all Canadian imports is set to go into effect Tuesday. Energy would be subject to a 10% levy. They were originally set to be imposed last month, but were postponed after Ottawa agreed to new border security measures. However, Trump announced Thursday he intends to move forward with the tariffs. Ottawa has said it would impose retaliatory tariffs on billions of dollars of American goods if the Trump administration follows through on its threats. And during a news conference in the UK today, Prime Minister Trudeau was asked.
My plans for the day? Doing whatever I feel like, I suppose. Same with tomorrow, and the day after that.
Alright guys, check it out. I just boiled chicken in here for the past hour. So it's really boiled. Paprika, onion powder, salt, pepper, stuff like that. And now I'm going to deep fry it. Alright, so I just took the chicken out of the boiling water. It's nice and cooked. And now we're going to deep fry it to give it that nice outside crust. So let's try to put it in with one hand here. That's one in. 2, 3, and 4. We got them all. Look at that nice chicken deep frying up in the oil. Alright, now it's got that nice gold color that I like. And you can see it's got that outside skin, but on the inside it's nice and cooked. So we're going to put in the honey garlic sauce I got right here. This stuff is amazing. And let's see how they turn out. Alright guys, check it out. These look amazing. So you can see on the inside how there's that good chicken, but on the outside there's that nice crust with the honey garlic sauce. Look at this. It's kind of hard to cut with one hand, so excuse the bad cutting here, but...
Swallows nest when skies are fair, but hide when storms are in the air.
Can you make a rotisserie chicken cheaper than Costco? Well, let's take a look. So we all know each of these costs $4.99. Now let's take a look at raw chicken. This looks like about the same size. A bundle of 2 costs $17.46, meaning each one costs $8.73. Meaning this uncooked chicken is more expensive than the rotisserie. This is what's known as a loss leader, meaning Costco is selling this less than its actual value in order to attract more customers. And it's one of the main reasons why this is always placed at the back of the store. That way the chances of you buying something else drastically increases. So is this loss leader justified? Well, in 2015, the then CFO stated that they were losing $40 million due to the chicken. And yes, that's a lot of money, but what if I told you in that same year, Costco made $2.38 billion in net profit, meaning the loss from the chicken was only 1.7% of this total amount, making this
25%, but we will see. I will.
PewDiePie challenged himself to become as good as, if not better, than the arts community over the span of 30 days and 100 days, and now he has decided to challenge himself and see how much he could improve over 365 days, which is an entire year. But unfortunately for PewDiePie, his progress has some struggle with bugs and making excuses.
The best rattan furniture is made from strands that are smooth, thin, and strong like silk. Furniture like that can be just as precious as a silver family heirloom. That's no exaggeration. Oh, my plan for the day? Doing whatever I feel like, I suppose. Same with tomorrow, and the day after that. Swallows nest when skies are fair, but hide when storms are in the air.
Practice doing turnarounds of the head from different angles and then slowly transition into drawing the torso and then the arms and every other part of the body. Practicing drawing each body part from different angles will make you so much better at drawing from your imagination and even drawing with reference if you have to.
Get into, just sketching random stuff I find online. Finally, I move on and I draw boys. This is the boys arc. I drew so much guys from anime because I thought I drew so many mangas. You probably recognize these. I think this is Jujutsu Kaisen.
So it seems PewDiePie was drawing a lot from all the anime he was watching and was basically just copying the poses and faces from whatever inspired him to draw, which is a good way to practice. But a better and faster way to practice will be to break down each pose into shapes and then solely focus on using simple shapes for the poses before then trying to learn anatomy and the muscles. Once you understand how the shapes translate into each pose, drawing the muscles over them will be so much easier as you progress. A good book to learn this is Michael Hampton's Figure Drawing Design book, and you can also pair it with Simplified Anatomy if you're trying to learn anatomy and how to see the muscles as shapes. Bonus book is TB Choi's Character Design Arts book. That's a really good book as well. I'll leave the links in the description. Character Design Arts book. That's a really good book as well. I'll leave the links in the description to all of these books.
Another thing was that people said I had an art background. That was like a rumor that went around. And I guess I take that as a compliment, but no, I do not. I have not studied art. That was the whole point of this video. I was not being disingenuous. I have not drawn since I was a kid. But I love doing Photoshop.
My plan for the day? Doing whatever I feel like, I suppose. Same with tomorrow, and the day after that. Swallows nest when skies are fair, but hide when storms are in the air. Oh, my plan for the day? Doing whatever I feel like, I suppose. Same with tomorrow, and the day after that. Swallows nest when skies are fair, but hide when storms are in.
Doge is forging ahead with customer spending and workforce. Cutting is never easy. Spending is more popular than slashing, and some GOP lawmakers are hearing from constituents even as some Trump voters face the knife. Here's the president with Elon Musk.
We're cutting down government. We're cutting down the size of government. We have to. We're bloated. We're sloppy. We have a lot of people that aren't doing their job.
The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country a $2 trillion deficit. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing. It is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here.
Changing the status quo is hard. Once something is created, it's next to impossible to even pare it down, which is why you're seeing so many court challenges, but it's also how you got $36 trillion in debt. Taylor Riggs co-hosts the Big Money Show and joins us now. Welcome, Taylor. Cutting is hard, and it's not without pain. Some GOP lawmakers have been facing some challenging crowds in town halls. So what should they say to even Trump voters who may be losing their jobs?
That you voted for this, remember, and that he is right. I mean, and Trey, you know this more than I do. Republicans have been screaming about our debt and our deficit for 20 years, and it's never come to fruition. And so people think that we're crying wolf. And what I would say is at $36 trillion in debt, we can no longer cry wolf. The issue, and I love that you played the Elon Musk clip, it is now or never. It is do or die. We have to do this. When our interest, paying the interest on our debt is $1 trillion and more than our defense budget every year, you have to do something. That is the beginning of the end of the empire, right? So I would remind them to go home and tell their constituents, we have to do this. It is painful. But I don't have another option. My worry, Trey, is it is a career killer. It is so easy to hand out money. Everyone's winning. Everyone has a slush fund. We're all drinking the punch bowl at the party. And then now they want to take that punch bowl away. And when it hits your district, in your red neighborhood, it hurts. And it is a career killer. And so I'm hopeful that even Republicans are still understanding the urgency behind Doge. I am worried about them saying, okay, well, never mind, because it's finally hitting home and my constituents are mad, so never mind. Let's just keep the party going so I can get reelected. So I'm hopeful but cautious at the same time.
All right, let's hear from one federal employee, and then I'll ask you about it on the other side.
Those are not real jobs producing federal revenue. Federal employees do not deserve their jobs. Federal employees do not deserve their paychecks.
Taylor, maybe things have changed since I left, but I think members of Congress are federal employees, and I know their staffs are, and I know their committee staffs are, and so are ICE agents and the military. Is everything on the table, including member salaries and staff? Because that might be a place Elon Musk decides to cut.
I know. One thing I love about Elon Musk is he brings his business acumen to the table. So what he did with X, which is formerly known as Twitter, he came in and he quite literally posted himself taking out the kitchen sink. He literally said, "We are throwing everything out with the kitchen sink." That is more of an analogy than I think it is real in this case. I think Doge is going to move fast. They will make mistakes, but they are trying to also be thoughtful and correct errors when they do make mistakes.
And I thank you for trying to help me understand that members of Congress are actually federal employees, because I didn't understand that whole federal employees don't work thing. But thank you for helping me and for joining me on a Sunday night.
My pleasure.
This morning, the Prime Minister was in the UK for a meeting with King Charles. Justin Trudeau went into his audience with the King, saying they would discuss what he called matters of interest to Canadians. And the CBC's Crystal Gumansing is with us from London, just outside of Buckingham Palace. Hey, Crystal, so tell us more about what we know happened in this meeting.
Well, Arthi, staff for King Charles here at Buckingham Palace did confirm the meeting, even sharing a few pictures on the King's social media page, posting them to X. From the appearance of those pictures, the two enjoyed a warm meeting at one point, even sharing a laugh before sitting down in Sandringham for that private session. Because these meetings are a private audience, we won't have an official readout from the palace detailing what was said. As I said, these are meant to be a moment for two leaders to have a frank discussion. But because we did hear from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Sunday while he was here for a security summit, we know
Just to be told, I've got nothing in the will, nothing, and he was worth £33 million. I'm divorced. Sugar at post-divorce, if I could go back, knowing what I know now, I would never have downloaded a dating app or ever gotten on one. People will get on dating apps, spend massive amounts of time chatting, talking, and texting, basically just to do a job interview, only to find out you don't have chemistry, and you've wasted hours, months, and weeks getting to know someone. People don't really know how to set the correct boundaries on that, and that's a whole other lesson. There's also not accountability because they are not your friend group, your church group, any kind of social group, so you can't even have that filter of knowing anything about their background, and they'll quickly ghost you.
The challenge of dating a single mom is that the new man will never be her top priority. At best, he'll come in fourth. Her children will always come first, followed by the relationship between her children and their father, and third, her self-preservation mentality for herself and her kids. There's nothing wrong with these three priorities when she's on her own. However, the main issue arises when she expects to be an equal partner with the new man, placing him fourth, while expecting him to prioritize her above all else.
Divorced my husband. Why did I divorce my husband? I divorced my husband because I was making a certain amount of money. I divorced my husband because I thought I didn't need him anymore. I divorced my husband because I had this senior position at work and thought I held the same position at home. I divorced my husband because I thought I was better than him because I had my degree now. I divorced my husband because I thought a successful marriage meant I was here and he was down here. That is not success. That's sickness. I found myself divorced and out there looking for love in all the wrong places. This one and that one and that one and that one and this one and that one, and my body count going up and my value going down. I'm just going to call it like a TI is. All the while, my husband found somebody else building a relationship and building a life with them. I should have stayed married to my husband. I felt like I was on this dark road with no street lights, pitch dark, and I couldn't find my way and didn't know which way to go. I felt lost. I felt like I was walking barefoot on that dark road with pebbles and hot rocks sticking my foot. I felt hurt. I felt alone because every time he and that one and this one and that one left my bed, I was alone all by myself. And which was supposed to be soft and comfortable for me, my pillow, it was now filled with tears. I should not have left my husband.
Same with tomorrow and the day after that.
Most women should appreciate their husband if he works, supplies health insurance, food, vehicle, housing, life insurance. The traditional way is the best we have with all its flaws, because humans figured out long ago the inherent flaws in women and men and how to best avoid the worst-case scenarios. Modernity is the worst-case scenario for relationships.
And I left my husband. I was only making like $16 an hour. And so that was not enough. And so I got myself into a lot of credit card debt because I moved into an apartment that I couldn't really afford, but I thought that someone else was going to be living with me in it. So,
What do you mean? The ex?
no. Okay, so right after I got divorced, I got into a situation with somebody I knew from work, and
how quickly after the divorce?
well, like immediately. It was like a rebound, right? I guess is what they would call it.
Okay.
And we
Like
worked
the
together.
day after?
Maybe. Sort of. Yes.
Okay. Huh?
So I knew him, right? We worked together. That's how we met.
Well, wait, how long were you married?
Almost 5 years.
Did you guys ever have any kids?
Yes.
And you got with this person a day after?
Yes, but see what I thought he was like the love of my life.
A day after divorce. Okay.
Yes.
Sure. And you thought he'd be living with you?
Yes. Like
I'm calling BS on the women saying men don't want women with children. Most older men who have been divorced end up marrying older women. What is really happening is these women are dating younger men, and those men don't want to manage her teenagers when they haven't even had their own kids yet. 45-year-old women shouldn't be dating 28-year-old chads, then complaining they are not ready for fatherhood.
What's the problem with dating as single moms? I don't understand the issue with these men. We're talking men in their late 30s, like 38, 39, and as soon as you mention you've got children, they don't want to fucking know. I don't get it. And then they go simping over 21-year-olds, and that's because they've got no responsibility, free-spirited to get to do whatever the hell they want, and it makes them look good and feel better about themselves. There is nothing wrong with dating a single mother. Like, my kids are practically teenagers. Well, my daughter is. She's nearly 16. My son's nearly 11. If anything, I've got more free time now opposed to what I had 4 years ago. This whole stigma of, like, dating someone with kids has really, really got to stop. Like, it's wrong. It really is wrong. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm 33 years old. I know what I want. I'm responsible. I do a pretty good job raising my children on my own. I've been single 4 years. What's the problem?
I'm divorced. I thought I'd be happier, except the judge set the child support amount at $326 a month. $326 a month for 2 kids for child support is what he has to pay me. $326 a month. Because he's not working. Because he chooses not to. I was able to cross-examine him, which was fun. And I asked him how many hours a week he spends working. Or trying to sell houses, because technically he still has a real estate license, so technically he's still a realtor. He said 15 hours a week, approximately, is how many hours he works per week. Grown man. Grown, able-bodied man with transportation and no child care to worry about. Says he works 15 hours a week.
Most men don't want to raise someone else's kids. It's not hard to understand. Men have a strong desire to see their own lineage grow, and that means raising their own biological kids with a good woman.
I transferred the Jeep title to my name 3 weeks before we separated.
That's accurate. You
had coerced me into signing over, a portion, adding your name to that in exchange for you replacing the money that you had removed from the LLC account that was there to make payments on the Jeep and take care of its maintenance.
Did I work the Jeep and I rented it in Turo for the past 3 years?
We did that together for a period of time, much less than 3 years.
Did you ask me to buy the tires of the Jeep with my money?
Absolutely not. That money was in the LLC account that was earned by us for the purposes of maintaining and making payments on the Jeep, and you had removed that money to your personal account.
Did you remember that I bought and I replaced the Jeep tires, and that was a cost of $2,000?
We did that. That money came from the LLC account.
So we both,
our LLC.
We both were maintaining the cost of the Jeep in one way or other way.
No, you had never personally contributed money to that account. However, I had on multiple occasions. You had either removed money from that account and it was not available to make the payments and pay for maintenance, or otherwise.
Did I replace and I purchased the tires for the Jeep? Yes or no?
Objection asked and answered.
Stang.
No wonder divorce has become such a heartless business. When women divorce and the now ex-husband is referred to as able-bodied, capable of working, whereas when a woman get tons of money in alimony and child support, being able-bodied is never mentioned.
My husband's funeral, which unfortunately I cannot make because obviously I am busy here in Tunisia. I would have loved to have gone. We were together for 17 years. Unfortunately for me, he did decide to die on the week I had planned to come on holiday, so I did make the decision not to go because, I need a holiday at the end of the day, and my holiday is way more important than sitting in a church watching people cry. I would love to give him a good send-off, so I'm going to get absolutely drunk tonight with this new guy that I met, and I'm going to raise a glass for you, Jeremy, because you were an amazing husband, very rich. I can't wait to do the will reading when I'm home. I have made sure I'm going to be home in time to do the will reading because I would not miss that for the world, because obviously I am due to get a lot of money, and that's a very, very important thing to me. So I hope you have a good funeral stay, Jeremy. Love you. All good things have to come to an end. So I did miss my husband's funeral because I was in holiday in Tunisia. I would not have missed my holiday for the world, and I know my husband would have understood because that's just the kind of guy he was. But yes, I have come back from my holiday just to make sure that I got back in time for the will reading, because I am not going to miss that for the absolute world. I have been held captive in the Ukraine for at least a week now, following my holiday in Tunisia, where I did get pregnant with a very well-known married celebrity's baby. However, I am very lucky to have been released just in the nick of time for my husband's will reading, because I do deserve all of that money. I spent 17 years with this man, which is a lot longer than any of his children did. So I deserve the inheritance a lot more than his own children. So I am going to fight the will with lawyers if he has left any of his inheritance to his children, because they do not deserve it, unlike me, who looked after him every single day for 17 years when they were out living their own lives. That money's mine.
This gold-digging woman preying on that old man who died is absolutely vile. Goes on and gets preggers on holiday while his funeral is on, and then expects money, and then when she gets nothing, she complains LOL. Absolute clown world stuff.
I spent 17 years of my life with an elderly man who smelled like cabbage, just to be told I've got nothing in the will, nothing, and he was worth £33 million. And you think this is funny? I have wasted my life with a geriatric coffin dodger for nothing. And why everyone thinks it's so funny that my husband donated all his money to a bunch of cats and dogs. Who even like cats and dogs? I'm literally gonna be homeless. Like, I've got no money. Not even my own house or my car. Like, I'm literally going to be poor. I'm gonna have to shop in fucking Asda, like all the other poor people. Not Asda. I've wasted my life thinking I was gonna get millions by marrying that elderly coffin dodger. And he looked like a shriveled up fucking prune.
Women believe a man should, by default, orbit around her and her children like a saintly satellite, providing for them.
Now that this cartel operative in Mexico say they're worried about being arrested or even killed as Trump cracks down on our southern border.
Maddie Rivera is in Washington with more. Maddie.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Yeah, the New York Times reports the Sinaloa cartel in particular has been disrupted because of President Trump's threats and Mexico's crackdown on cartels. Cartel operatives have reportedly had to move labs to other parts of the country or temporarily stop production. Other cartel members are becoming more afraid of being arrested or even killed. One person telling the New York Times, "You can't be calm, you can't even sleep, because you don't know when they'll catch you. The most important thing now is to survive." After President Trump threatened to impose 25% tariffs, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum deployed 10,000 National Guard troops to the border and hundreds more soldiers to the Sinaloa state to curb the flow of fentanyl. The pressure against some criminal groups appears to have ramped up since then. Mexico's security minister says there have been arrests and seizures every day. Last month, the Trump administration also designated 8 Latin American organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. On Friday, 29 Mexican cartel members were extradited to the United States. The Wall Street Journal also reports Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned the U.S. military was preparing to take action against drug cartels if Mexico did not do more. The Defense Department reportedly declined to comment. Lawrence Eaton with me.
All right, Maddie, thank you very much. So the cartel, interestingly enough, the cartel leaders were able to talk to the New York Times. They were able to find them. We should be able to find those leaders, and that is what is terrifying them. Meanwhile, in Northern Virginia, if you were in the country illegally, you got a heads up over the weekend because the reporter, the editor for the Migrant Insider, Pablo Mequinez, with 45,000 followers, put out that ICE is planning raids today, that's for Monday, and tomorrow in Northern Virginia. 75 to 100 different warrants. And as of about an hour ago, that had 615,000 views. So the migrant community is well aware of what ICE has got planned to. But you see what he was willing to put out there, though. He said it was 75 to 100 judicial warrants. That means a judge has signed an order for them to be brought into custody, but yet he was still okay with tipping them off.
That's dangerous for our guys.
Yes, it is.
Consequences for this guy? I mean, do the police go after him now because he's
They need to.
he's interfering with an investigation?
But he's a reporter. He got information. It's whoever leaked it to him. It could be somebody from the courts. It could be somebody from the federal government.
I think that if you go out and hinder an investigation,
just because you're a reporter doesn't matter.
There should be consequences for that.
Yeah, well, as a reporter, I'm going to broadcast to everyone.
You're defending people who have done something wrong. These are criminals. They're here illegally.
I think the line is when you start to aid and abet, whether you're a journalist or not. I don't even think that's journalism right there. He's clearly trying to help these people that are there. That post was linked also to the activists there on the ground as well. So these people just got to flee. This is what happened with Aurora as well. He had 200 federal agents that were flew from all across the country to help out with this raid, and they only ended up catching about 3 or 4 of the people that they wanted to get.
Yeah. Well, the guy got a scoop, and it could come back to boomerang, because ultimately ICE is going to go eventually and find those people.
Deal, and he did. Florida Congressman Carlos Jimenez joins me now. Congressman,
did the Democrats sink this deal, in your opinion?
I think if that story is correct, and there's every indication that it is correct, I think the Democrats sunk the deal on purpose in order not to give Donald Trump a huge win. I mean, imagine if we can get peace in Ukraine, just like the president said he would do. That's a huge boost for our president, and the Democrats can have none of it. And that's why I believe they did sabotage the deal. And believe me, this is putting politics ahead of people's lives. This is putting politics ahead of the national security interests of the United States, Europe, and the world. I mean, this conflict can spiral out of control. It's outrageous what the Democrats did, but it's also outrageous that Zelensky actually listened to them. So my advice to Zelensky, come over here, meet with the Democrats again, take really good notes, and do exactly the opposite of what they're telling you to do.
Do you think that the President Trump, has just washed his hands of Zelensky, walked away from him completely?
No, I don't think so, because I don't think that's that would be a good policy. Look, Russia is the aggressor. We cannot allow Putin to win in this regard, but Zelensky has got to come to his senses, apologize to the president, and then come over here, or we'll send somebody over there. We'll FedEx the package over there so he can sign the mineral rights deal, because that makes America a partner and then brings America to the table. And now when you're confronting Russia, you got America by your side, not walking away like I fear that we may do. I don't think we're going to do, because look, it's not in our best interest to let Ukraine fall into the hands of Russia.
Putin is a pretty happy camper right now, especially after everything that unfolded last week, and of course, in particular, following the fiasco in the Oval Office between Trump and Zelensky. I think what has been underscored here for anybody that didn't really realize it is that Donald Trump doesn't have Kiev's back, and that has thrown everything into, I don't know, like fast motion. I mean, what has happened in Europe, in London over the weekend, has just been kind of hectic as they try to figure out some kind of way to right the ship.
Okay, in your book, Geopolitics and Democracy, Oxford University Press, you have a perfect phrase for this moment that all of our listeners and viewers feel, and that is reaping the whirlwind. Can the traditional processes that tribalists lectured on for decades, the Chatham House has talked about, CFR and all the rest, Peter, can reaping this whirlwind, can those traditional processes work, or do we need something new?
A great question, Tom. I mean, I would say right now, the standard kinds of checks and balances are not in place. So the most obvious one, when you think domestically, is Congress serving as a check on the president and so forth. To me, I think one of the most interesting parts of the developments in the Trump administration, the Trump 2.0, is the way that his cabinet positions have been filled. He has essentially structured this in such a way that everything is coming out of the Oval Office, and there is no opportunity for any check or blocking coalition to emerge among his cabinet officials. Where are his generals? There's nothing horizontal there. And I will say, internationally, I mean, it seems to me with respect to the Allies, he's just got them on the run. I mean, he is leveraging America's market, and he is leveraging America's power to extract concessions. And what makes it very difficult, I think, from whether it's from Canada to the UK to France to Germany, is they don't know where this will stop. And so there's no obvious kind of break there. The one place he's certain to get pushback is from Beijing.
So are you surprised, Peter, that there hasn't been any pushback from, say, Congress on some of these policy pronouncements or what happened in the Oval Office last week?
I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm personally, when I look at this and think about it in terms of what's good for the United States over the long haul, over the horizon, I'm disappointed by it, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised for at least two reasons. One is Donald Trump owns the Republican Party, and they're just people that are too afraid of stepping out of line. And I think that for a lot of people, they think that the system that is the international system, can, basically suffer a fair amount of, I don't know what you want to call it, like damage. So yeah, okay, so they impose this tariffs, and the tariff rates overall go up, the world won't come to an end. I mean, it seems to me that even, big names on Wall Street like Jamie Dimon have gotten themselves to that point, so that they're prepared to see some bit of slippage from the traditional rules-based order that Republican and Democratic presidents alike agree to.
Zelensky, he met with European leaders this weekend after he left the U.S. The UK Prime Minister announcing a multi-billion-dollar aid package now for Ukraine. UK and European allies seem to be racing to try to fix this fracture between the U.S. and Ukraine. Will that work?
I don't know. It's hard to say. And fixing the fracture to what end and to how far, right? So they had, I think, a very good meeting. For anybody who cares about national security for Ukraine in Europe, they came up with new aid and an idea perhaps for a ceasefire and a peace agreement. And the Trump administration should be happy about that. They keep saying the Europeans need to do more. They're doing more. Number two, when it comes to repairing our bilateral relationship, the 3 points that Garrett just laid out, let's just be clear. Two of them are points about personal differences. It's about the personalities, the whims of our president. That's not his job. His job is to represent American national security interests and leave his own personality out of it. And moreover, the notion that Zelensky needs to say thank you to the president and the vice president, needs to say thank you to the American people. He's done that 1,000 times. But what have they done for him? Remember, they are giving Putin everything he wants. Before negotiations have started, they voted, Mr. Vance, as a senator, voted against the very aid package that he now wants to be thanked for. So I hope they'll just put aside the personal stuff and focus on, very concretely, the minerals deal. Point number 2 that Garrett just said. President Zelensky, his team has made it crystal clear they are ready to sign whenever, under what conditions. I hope President Trump and his team will do that immediately as a first baby step for repairing U.S.-Ukrainian relations.
We are seeing President Zelensky give thanks. He's been posting on X after that meeting that he's grateful for U.S. support, that he's thankful to President Trump despite that Oval Office meeting. Let's remind our viewers how that unfolded. Here's your part.
We're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. What you're doing is very disrespectful to the country. This guy, that's actually far more than a lot of people said they should have. You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Igor, as you reflect now on what went down, do you think Zelensky should have done anything differently there?
Well, and if you remember, you asked me what my advice would be, and I said, never resisted the actions. So unfortunately, I was wrong. Not in the sense that President Zelensky didn't resist the theatrics, but the whole situation reminded me of that classic James Bond film. Remember when James Bond basically says, "You expect me to talk?" And the villain says, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." It was exactly like that. I don't believe there was anything that Zelensky could have done differently for a different outcome. And to be honest, what's worrying here is not the actual meeting. I think, there's a very fine line between pushing for peace and outright helping Russia. And certain things, some of them are not Ukraine related, like, for example, the infamous news about the Cyber Command stepping down against Russia recently. You know, I believe that line has been crossed. And therefore, I think President Zelensky needs to sign a mineral deal if it's on the table and if it's sane. President Zelensky needs to be open to this relationship, but, you know, there's only so much he can do. It's not personal, it's a bilateral relationship between two countries.
Ambassador, this fracture is also playing out domestically, with House Speaker Johnson over the weekend suggesting Zelensky may need to resign after what happened. Take a listen.
Well, something has to change, and either he needs to come to his senses and come back to the table in gratitude, or someone else needs to lead the country to do that.
Yet, Republican Senator James Lankford defended Zelensky. So from a diplomatic perspective, how do you view domestic lawmakers openly debating whether Zelensky should continue to lead his country after clashing with President Trump?
It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. The arrogance of the speaker to say that the democratically elected leader of Ukraine fighting for his existence, for his country, should resign. It's absolutely outrageous. It does no good. It doesn't help any national interest of the United States. I want to keep coming back to this. What is good for American national security? Leave the Ukrainians aside. This is no good for our American national security, and it's exactly what Putin has been wanting since he invaded Ukraine. So what team are we on? Have we switched to the Russian side? Because I don't think the American people want to go along with President Trump and the speaker to end up on the Russian side, the side of dictatorship against democracy. 81% of the American people don't trust Putin. And I think the president is playing with fire. He tries to move us in that direction. I think it's going to backfire. You're already seeing it in town halls. You're already seeing protests. When the vice president goes skiing about Ukraine, I think they're seriously misjudging the American people. We are not so foolish as to think that it's in America's interest to join the autocrats and throw under the bus the Democrats.
Yeah, we're showing some of that video from those protests over the weekend. This is what Vice President J.D. Vance faced when he went skiing with his family. See these protesters holding Ukrainian flags and signs. This was a weekend ski trip in Vermont. Eva, what's the reaction inside Ukraine? How are Ukrainians feeling in this moment?
Well, first of all, we're seeing a major rally around the flag attack now. I mean, everyone is behind the president, even some of the fierce opposition leaders are either remaining quiet or are openly speaking in support of President Zelensky. Secondly, it's nobody's business who our democratically elected president is. Only Ukrainians decide that, and that's exactly why we're fighting the Russians. The Russians wanted to decide for us. Tough luck, that's not going to happen. But I have some good news as well. I think it was Vice President Vance who said that President Trump who said Ukraine doesn't have any cards. We're not playing cards. I fully agree with my president, but at the same time, I think they're wrong. Ukraine has a number of cards it can play. And if we ever want to surrender, I'm pretty sure President Zelensky will travel to Moscow rather than Washington.
Ambassador, we have seen the U.S. do things, say things to try to get on Putin's good side, it would seem, including you learned, stopping the cyber operations against Russia, which apparently took place before Friday's meeting with Zelensky. And I know Igor mentioned this earlier, but there's also President Trump calling Zelensky a dictator, other Russia-friendly rhetoric we've been hearing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked about that yesterday, and take a listen to his response.
We've spent 3 years talking Vladimir Putin names. That's not the point. Now, the point that we're at now is we're trying to get the man to a table. That's the goal here. It's that simple. Can we try to sit with them and figure out whether there's anything? What are the Russians' demands? Under what conditions would the Russians be willing to stop this war? And as I said, we don't know what those are because we haven't talked to them in 3 years.
Go get them to the table. What's your response to Rubio's argument or the strategy that he is laying out there?
First of all, if they were actually serious about trying to mediate an end to this war, I want to underscore, I'm not sure they are serious about that. But if they were, the first move would be to increase military assistance to Ukraine, to create a stalemate on the battlefield. Wars end in two ways. One side wins, or there's a stalemate. If you want to create the permissive conditions for an actual peace negotiation, that is your first move. They're doing exactly the opposite. Second, to your point, they have thrown all kinds of concessions at Vladimir Putin before negotiating. So they said Ukraine can't join NATO. They said President Zelensky has to give up territory. They said there won't be American soldiers as part of this. They've cut foreign assistance to independent media. They've invited President Putin to join the G7. I could go on and on. That any of this is working. And the fact that he doesn't know what they think, he just spent 4 hours with Foreign Minister Lavrov. I have yet to see one concrete step that they've taken to put pressure at all on Vladimir Putin. Right now, it's complete capitulation. And I've negotiated with these guys. I've negotiated with the Putin administration. Capitulation does not work. They just put that in their pocket and they demand more. And you're already seeing that in the Russian press. They've already pocketed all those concessions, and now they want more. They want the Ukrainians to limit their army to under 100,000. They want the Ukrainians to not import weapons anymore. They want to de facto turn Ukraine into a vassal state. And oh, by the way, they also want Zelensky to be removed. Isn't it strange that all of a sudden Americans are now saying the same thing?
Former Ambassador Michael McFaul and Igor Novikov, thank you both for coming on back. I appreciate the conversation.
President Trump hitting back at Ukrainian President Zelensky just a short time ago on President Zelensky's comments in London yesterday during a briefing where he said, quote, an agreement to end the war is still very, very far away, and no one has started all these steps. President Trump responded to Zelensky by saying, quote, this is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer. It is what I was saying. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing and Europe. In the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the U.S. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking? The Democrats aren't outraged by President Zelensky. They're mad at President Trump.
Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Putin believe that they're going to intimidate and bully and threaten President Zelensky to join the club of corrupt and unprincipled leaders. They will literally need to wait until hell freezes over twice, because this is the man who is committed to the survival of his country.
The propaganda is what's coming out of J.D. Vance's mouth, and it's Russian propaganda.
I saw the meeting as a despicable display of bullying by the president.
It was Vice President Vance, particularly, who was on the offense, who was berating President Zelensky.
It is absolutely shameful what is happening right now. The White House has become an arm of the Kremlin.
It just have never felt such shame about American policy before, and I don't know how our allies trust us after this.
Putin and his cronies are probably popping champagne bottles right now.
We have someone that is occupying the White House, and as far as I'm concerned, he is an enemy to the United States.
On the other hand, Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is standing up for President Trump and calling out Democrats for having a double standard when it comes to peace talks.
Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. If there are no negotiations, what is the alternative? Another 4 years of war, another 3 years of war, in which the United States and Europe continues to pour billions of dollars into a war in Ukraine? Is that the alternative?
Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Catano here with my co-host, Kaylee McEnany and Karen Faulkner. And also joining us today, Cheryl Castoni, Fox Business anchor and host of American Dream Home on Fox Business, and B. Larry Kudlow, host of Kudlow on Fox Business. Now, Kaylee, I want to talk to you about the Democrat reaction and perhaps more chronologically accurate, the Democrat carpet that was laid out for President Zelensky. Because the reality is the impact on him, the influence on him, and his preparation was far different and did not begin with the Oval Office what we saw on camera. In fact, as we saw earlier, Democrat Chris Murphy came out and said, oh, we had a meeting beforehand, posting a photo on X and saying, and I told him not to accept a peace deal and the mineral deal.
Yeah, he met with several lawmakers, to your exact point. And one thing is clear, I mean, Zelensky came in with a strategy. And it's confounding why your strategy would be fight the hand that feeds me. And that sounds harsh, but make no mistake, the U.S. has spent Zelensky in Ukraine to the tune of $183 billion. Something that I think was missed by a lot of folks is this. The dispute that we saw play out in dramatic, explosive fashion here on Outnumbered did not take place until 43 minutes into the meeting. What happened in the preceding 43 minutes? It's an important question. Bill Wegman of Real Clear Politics did an analysis of this, looked at the transcript, and if you read the transcript, you find Zelensky continually pushing the buttons of the U.S. delegation. He was bringing up the security guarantee, which President Trump has said explicitly we're not going to put in there as the United States of America. Then he contradicted Trump at several times, trying to correct him. And then Trump said, you know, let's negotiate first, sign this peace deal, then we can talk about security. And Zelensky said, well, that will not work. So the 43 minutes before were Zelensky pushing the buttons of the United States. And then it was Zelensky who instigated it, took this to a new plateau when he looked at J.D. Vance and said, well, tell me what you mean by diplomacy in a rather hostile fashion. That was his strategy. It did not work. And when you're in the face of U.S. public polling that shows Pew right now, do you have confidence in Zelensky? Well, 72% said yes in 2022. 48% say yes now. 78% tell Ipsos they want a peace deal. Where do you think those numbers are today in the face of Zelensky's intransigence? I imagine they are much harsher.
Larry, the whole point is those are arguing these critics of Trump. So what are you saying? Are you confusing peace with the rote bankrolling and an inability to accept any type of deal whatsoever? A unilateral position, that's not what makes peace.
As Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Friday, this is the third time that Zelensky has rejected the minerals infrastructure mining deal. Now, let me just pause on this because it's such an important point. In that deal, American companies would come, putting boots on the ground to start the mining and excavation of the rare earth minerals and gold and silver and whatever. This sets up a tripwire so that if the Russians start rolling tanks into these mineral excavations or start bombing them, then they would know that all bloody hell will break loose with the United States and with Donald Trump, who is not Joe Biden. He's a very strong leader. So Zelensky, however, would not accept the minerals deal because he keeps denying the importance for security. This is a major step to secure Ukraine. It puts the United States into Ukraine. It puts our business, again, private sector boots on the ground. You can bet they'll have security forces. So, coming back to what Kayleigh said, I think was right on target. Democrats teed him up to reject essentially all the peace offers here. Zelensky knows full well. Look, he met with Bessent in Kyiv. Bessent said that he was rude and obnoxious to him in those meetings. Yeah. He was briefed by White House people before this Oval Office meeting. He knew exactly what was coming, but he was also briefed, you're exactly right, by guys like